What is happening out there, rotoscouts baseball fans? Welcome to a Friday show, gang. You made it. It's the end of the week. Hopefully the workday's over. Diving into baseball and your weekends. If you're still wrapping up at work, hopefully you're at least able to listen. Maybe you just got this in your ear or something. In which case, I don't really envy you having to listen to my voice in your ear in like an earphone kind of a situation, but I do appreciate you being here and hanging out, and we've got a lot to talk about today. 14-game marathon show, marathon slate, gigantic board to talk our way through. It's going to be a fun one. We're probably going to be here for a little while. Going to try and keep an eye on the clock, keep us to, did the math, put it in the Discord, 10 minutes a game, puts us at 140 minutes, 20 minutes to do the intro, talk about the run totals, talk about the pitchers, and then 20 minutes for general nonsense. Puts us exactly at a 3-hour show, gets us out of here at 6:15. We will see if that happens. Hopefully we'll beat that time. I mean, I don't necessarily want to be here talking for 3 straight hours, but we will do what we need to do to get through this one. First game up, Colorado Rockies at the New York Yankees, an 8.5 run total in that one. Just a 3.09 on the Colorado side. Yanks, one of the top teams on the board, the highest run total on the board, 5.54 up top. Definitely an interesting spot for some New York bats. I'm sure they'll be a little bit popular. Kind of wish it was still the Cleveland series for the weekend. I'll be at the game tomorrow. I believe it's Old Timers Day tomorrow, which is fun. But obviously, Guardians just a more fun series than having the Rockies in. But it'll be fun to just be at the game, and I'll be there early tomorrow probably and check out all the Old Timer stuff and everything. Happy Friday to you too, Anthony Taylor. Forgot to say hi to everybody before I dove right in. Cujo's here. TGIF to you too. Colin Sutherland. Dimitri's looking to print something tonight. I like it. Holler for dollars back to you too, Lone Wolf. Ken Woodhouse is here. Andy's here. Ducking3 is here. Jake Swells. Larry C. Larry says we need a stopwatch. Yeah, that would be a good idea. Or like a chess clock. Just something that can hit. Game done. Bang. Start the new one. Tiz is heading to a concert. Who you seeing, Tiz? What kind of a concert? Yeah, should be a fun one, Jake. I like these big slates. Woody doesn't like my voice. I don't like my voice either. It's what I was saying, Woody. Shipped the Minimax last night for $1,500 for Could Be Travis. Love it, buddy. Awesome. Congratulations. That's great. Nice little score. Not bad at all. Congrats. Congrats to anybody else out there that had anything else. 30 Seconds to Mars, Tez. Okay, that's, what's his face's band, right? What the hell's his name? Jared Leto, right? That's his band, right? Or is that a different band? Now I gotta Google them. Yeah, that is Jared Leto's band. All right. I know what I'm talking about. Cool. Are you a fan, or you just like happen to be seeing them? I don't know that I've ever actually heard them. Leto's all over the place. Can be a very good actor. Can be a little bit weird. Wasn't a big fan of his Joker. Didn't know Tiz was a 15-year-old girl from 2008. Ooh. Anyway, Game 2, Astros at the Orioles, a 4.40 implied total for the Astros, 4.19 on the other side for the O's. The Yankees and Rockies, by the way, it's Carlos Rodon going for the Yankees, Kyle Freeland going for the Rockies. In this one, Hunter Brown on the mound for the Astros, pretty solid pitcher, but obviously a very tough matchup. And then Cade Povich, who is talented, but needs a little bit of polish, has been a little bit up and down in his brief major league career so far. Had a good one in his most recent outing against Boston, 6 strikeout game, 2 runs over 6 1/3. Maybe we could get a little bit out of him, but a terrible, terrible matchup for DFS upside against the Astros more often than not. Chris Bassett going for the Blue Jays, facing the Angels. He's got them at just 3.78 implied runs, and then his team pulling a nice 5.33 implied total against Jack Kochanowicz, on the mound for Los Angeles. Blue Jays looking kind of interesting, but that probably is going to come down. I haven't checked it in the last couple of minutes. No Vladdy Guerrero in the lineup for the Blue Jays. They put out a kind of a funky lineup. Let me actually see if that's come down. It won't be gigantic, but I bet it's come down by a half a run. And it has. So we're here, and So it got a little tighter. Jay's down to a 4.96. I think that's more realistic for that version of the lineup, but still looking like a pretty good spot. And I don't think we're considering Kachanowicz. Oops. Chris Bassett definitely at least worthy of consideration, considering given how many innings he's capable of eating, given that it's a if not great matchup against the Angels, at least a pretty fair matchup against the Angels. So not a bad spot for Bassett, and obviously a pretty appealing total on that side of the board. Cubbies against the Marlins, 4.18 implied total for Chicago, showing a ton of power against Max Meyer in the home run model. They've got Kyle Hendricks on the mound. He's benefiting a little bit from the ballpark and the opponent, 3.90 implied total from Miami, but Hendo is not really a DFS option. Very, very thin upside, minimal strikeout pitcher. There is, again, for facing that opponent, they're at a 3.90 for a reason, but I tend to favor bats on both sides in that one. Diamondbacks and the Red Sox, a 4.58 implied total for Arizona going up against Brian Bayo. And then the Red Sox also looking pretty good at 5+ against Ryan Nelson. Both of those pitchers can be successful from time to time. Nelson gave us another decent one his last time out. We've talked about him a lot recently. In that game against the Rays in the most recent start on the 16th, 6 1/3, just 1 earned run on 5 hits, struck out 6. The earned run came on a solo homer. He's been rolling. We missed on the one day we really laser focused on him, but every other start since that one and a handful of starts before that one were very, very good. Not necessarily saying that he's a go-to option against the Red Sox here, obviously, but for a very cheap price, I do think he's at least in the mix, despite the obviously very high total and the extreme hitting conditions that Fenway Park has provided all year long. Rangers at the Guardians, just a 7-run total in that one. It's Nathan Eovaldi going for the Rangers. It's Tanner Bybee for the Guardians. Pretty good pitching matchup. 3.33 implied total on the Rangers side. 3.75 implied total on the Guardians. Definitely looks like a spot to extract some pitching. We know that both of those offenses are capable, and there are players up and down those lineups that we like for DFS, but those totals are definitely suggesting that we're looking more pitching in that one. Chris Sale, the top-ranked pitcher on the board, top projected well into the 40s on the FanDuel scale, into the 20s on the DraftKings scale by projection. Facing the Nationals, they're at a 2.94 implied total, the low point on the entire slate. Sale's Braves are at a 4.66, pretty respectable-looking total against Mackenzie Gore, who we were talking about a little bit in the Discord. I don't love where he's projected, but I didn't mess with it because I do think he's talented. I do think there's strikeout upside to be had in that Braves lineup. 2 out of his last 3 starts, despite a little bit of... I think it was Larry in the chat that pointed out the dip in quality recently. There's a little bit of diminishment in the makeup of his fastball recently, and it got hit hard through August. But in 2 of those 3 August starts, he did strike out 6 hitters, and he was okay in the one in the middle. He gave up 5 runs, but none of them were earned. So there's that. The starts haven't exactly been deep. He hasn't completed the 6th inning in a month plus, 2 months plus. June 14th looks like the last time was the last time he completed the 6th. So I don't love the upside for a quality start even if he's rolling, but he did go 5 2/3 in the last one despite giving up 5, struck out 6 in that against Philadelphia. It's a fairly comparable start against a higher end team. On the right day, I do think he can get Gore out to those medium projections, and he's got a little bit of ceiling in the matchup beyond it. But very big slate. I totally get it if you don't trust it, want to leave it on the board. I'm not totally sure I trust where he's projected. Sale, obviously, if you can afford him, put him in your lineup. He's ridiculous and has a very good opportunity here. Phillies at the Royals, a 9-run total. Looks like another pretty healthy spot for offense. The Royals side pulling a 4.88 implied total against Taijuan Walker, making his, 3rd start back? 3rd start back, hasn't completed the 5th, gave up exactly 3 runs in each of the first 2 outings back. Seems like another gettable spot against Taijuan. And then a 4.21 implied total for the Phils against Michael Wacha. Not a dead spot. Wacha definitely is gettable. He's been pretty good all season, but that Phillies lineup is outrageous. So we'll consider that might be a both-sided situation there. The Cards at the Twins, 8.5 runs on the board there. Minnesota getting most of it at 4.67 implied runs. Cardinals down at just 3.92. It is David Festa going for the Twins. It's Andre Pallante on the hill for the Cards, so that's why the Twins are looking pretty decent. Festa overall has been pretty good. Find some strikeout upside. The depth is a little bit shaky. 5 innings should probably be the expectation, but a talented kid against a gettable Cards lineup, so he's on the board a little bit. Tigers against the White Sox. Tigers getting most of the 8.5 runs in this one. 4.70 implied total for them. They're going to be facing the corpse of Chris Flexen, and then it's Cater Montero, who's been capable enough and now gets the best matchup in baseball, facing the White Sox. 3.89, 3.90 implied total for Chicago. JP Sears going for the Athletics, keeping the Brewers, a pretty decent Brewers lineup, down to just 3.93 implied runs. Sears has been on a bit of a roll. 7 innings plus in 4 straight starts. He's given up 5 total runs in those 4 starts combined. A handful of solid strikeout games, a pair of 9 strikeout games across those 4 starts. That roll is coming off of a total meltdown where he gave up 7 earned runs, 8 runs total on 9 hits to the Astros at the end of July. But his August and his last start in July have been absolutely fantastic. Not necessarily predictive of anything. Tough matchup here against the Brewers. That run came against the Giants twice, the White Sox, and the Blue Jays. Brewers probably the best team out of that group. But Sears has undeniably been pitching pretty well, and we've always been able to pick off spots here and there with JP Sears. We'll take a look at him. 3.65 implied total on the other side for a somewhat improved Aaron Savali. Most of his starts with Milwaukee have been better than what he looked like with Tampa Bay for most of the year. So it's another spot against Oakland we can probably consider. It looks like he's at a fairly good price on both sites. Just a 3.65 implied total for Oakland against, and the ballpark helps out a little bit as well. Mets at the Pods. Speaking of good pitching parks, it's Joe Musgrove going for the Pods. It's Paul Blackburn going for the Mets. 2 reasonably, serviceable type pitchers. You can see what both guys are doing to the run totals. Just a 3.53 implied total for the Mets, which honestly feels a little bit low against Musgrove, who is probably going to give us 5 and not much more, and then into the bullpen. 4.06 implied total on the San Diego side against Blackburn, who is, okay, like dead on the average kind of a pitcher, capable of snapping off a good game, but also definitely gettable for 6 to 8 runs on a bad day. So that's probably going to end up looking like a 4-corner spot, and we'll see what we think of Joe Musgrove. Only 4 1/3 in each of the 2 August starts since returning. So question the depth there. Giants at the Mariners, a 3.26 implied total for the Giants going up against Luis Castillo. Obviously a pretty good-looking spot for pitching there. And then coming back the other way, Hayden Birdsong. We were also talking about him briefly in the Discord. Kid's got a lot of talent, and he's facing another very, very good matchup with a lot of strikeout potential. Needs to really harness things, still needs some polish probably. But the strikeout talent is already established. He had a 12 strikeout game against the Rockies at Coors Field. He had an 8 strikeout game against that same Rockies team coming off of that. He's got 5 games where he struck out 5, which, not bad given that those were 4 innings and change in terms of the depth of start. So just needs to, really establish his footing as far as getting through 6 innings, finishing starts. But there's a lot of talent for the money there. He's cheap today, so interesting spot. And Castillo on the other side obviously looks like a very good option with the Giants in town. The Rays and the Dodgers to round things out, 3.61 implied total for Tampa Bay. They're facing Bobby Miller, another very talented pitcher, but another guy who might be on a short leash. He's only made 1 start back, 4 2/3, gave up 4 earned runs. Did face 22 hitters in that one, allowed 8 hits, only 1 strikeout as well. So a little bit shaky there as far as an option, but that is an appealingly low total, and that Rays lineup is very, very high strikeout. Feeding a lot of upside to the other side of it, though, 4.90. Let's call it a 5-run total for the Dodgers against Tyler Alexander. They're drawing a bunch of power. I ended up making Mookie the home run pick of the day just because I don't think I've used him all year, and you've shown a decent number. Didn't want to go to some obvious guys, or I don't know that I've used Shohei all year, but didn't want to go to him. So landed on Mookie. And I like that spot. Looking like an appealing spot for some Dodgers bats to end the night. Might be a nice little late night hammer on a gigantic 14-game slate. Okay. 3:32. All right, we're still on pace. 3:15 start. We're still on pace for our setup. Chris Sale, top of your pitching board. 11-5, 11-1, and honestly, totally worth it. Monster projections offset by projections from everyone else on the board. I saw he's a little bit lower than this in some spots, a little bit higher than this in some others. It's a matter of a couple strikeouts one way or the other. The Nationals not the highest strikeout lineup in baseball, but Sale more than capable of finding his upside. Carlos Rodon against the Rockies in Yankee Stadium. I never fully trust Rodon, or at least not this year. Last year, Prior to that, maybe a little bit more faith, but he is very, very talented on the right day. He's not that expensive at 97 on FanDuel compared to the very top of the board. 97 on DraftKings mixes in well with the top of the board, and he's believable up there against that Rockies team. They are low end. There are some interesting right-handed power bats in that lineup now to throw at the lefty. Some of those young kids that we've talked about a lot, the Michael Talias of the world, but you kind of gotta lean Rodon in that matchup. So I think he's believable up there. If you don't like him, Luis Castillo, definitely appealing at 10-2, 9,800. Not much price difference on DK. A little bit beefier on FanDuel, but you could probably find a way to stretch for the extra 5. Mackenzie Gore, again, I don't love that he's this high up the board as far as just like what the projections look like. But I mean, if we consider just even on name brand plus matchup and everything about it, is anybody below Hayden Birdsong really all that established? Or if they're already established, are they still all that good anymore? Like Joe Musgrove? I mean, look at this list of pitchers. So it's not the craziest thing in the world that Gore would be up, one of the more highly ranked pitchers. It's just really hasn't been totally sharp this year. But I do think there's a little bit of additional upside in that Braves lineup, the weakened version of that Braves lineup and all the strikeouts that are available there. Just needs to find his form. So there's reason to believe, at least in the strikeout potential. And if he manages to keep runs off the board, then I think you're there. So I don't love it, but I might play it. Chris Bassett against the Angels at 85-88, effectively priced for all the innings he's capable of giving you in that spot. Nathan Eovaldi against Cleveland, just a low strikeout, bad matchup for him against the Guardians. But both sides of that one, both pitchers land right there. So both sides obviously a little bit appealing for pitching shares. I don't know, it's tough. I tend to think that Eovaldi is the higher end DFS pitcher, but he's clearly in the worst matchup for DFS scoring, where I have less trust, less faith in Bybee, but I'd rather target the Rangers. So between the two, it's difficult to say which I actually like better. Obviously very, very close on the projection board. I don't think you're necessarily going wrong either way, but they're probably not the most appealing options either way, given the matchups there. Hunter Brown against Baltimore, it's kind of the same thing as these two. All three of those guys just in more challenging matchups than some of these pitchers that surround them on the board. But every one of those guys more than talented enough to get through those teams. 9,400 across the board for Hunter Brown. Worth paying for. He is a talented guy, and he's been pitching well throughout the season. Birdsong, talked about him just a minute ago, but again, just a spectacular matchup against Seattle. If he can harness his stuff and complete 6 innings for a change, that would be plus kind of upside, because there are a ton of strikeouts that he can go find in that lineup, especially at 66, your first entry in the bargain bin on DraftKings. 78, nice cheap price on FanDuel. That said, 77 on FanDuel for Aaron Savali against Oakland. Just as appealing, and $100 less if I need that. If that makes a difference in terms of what bat I can get, I will definitely take Savali shares against Oakland over Birdsong against Seattle to save the $100. A little bit different on DraftKings, but he's very much in that SP2 bargain bin at just 7,200, and a very good matchup. Keita Montero against the White Sox, 6,400, another bargain bin option on DraftKings. There's a lot of value to work with today. It's a very deep slate. It's a very big slate. And again, once you hit like this point on the board, there's a lot of just same through here. There's some bad spots, but there's a lot of just same kind of a big, broad mid-range. Paul Blackburn's part of that, but not a great matchup against San Diego, 83-84. He's also a little bit offset by price, and price in that matchup for Blackburn doesn't make him a great fit. JP Sears at 9,200, 8,300. He's priced up for that good run that he's on FanDuel. I do not like it that much against the Brewers at 92 on FanDuel. A lot of different ways you can spend your money there. 83 on DraftKings is a little bit more reasonable, but probably another spot where better values and better payups. Max Meyer against the Cubs, I tend to lean toward the Cubs, especially with them showing some power. Musgrove, I think you're just probably drawing some short innings there, and I have a healthy respect for that Mets lineup, regardless of what the Vegas line says. Andre Pallante, the Twins are showing too much upside there. Don't really like the pitcher that much, 72, 73. I think it's a situation where you land more around the medians than anything else. Bobby Miller, we'll see what the innings look like. I don't really trust it for more than 5 innings, but it's a terrific matchup against Tampa Bay, and on the right day, he's going to give you some good strikeout stuff. Waka against Philly, don't love, especially not at these prices, but he has pitched well all season. Ryan Nelson, I do think at 67 on DraftKings is definitely an SP2 to keep in your pocket. It's a terrible situation, going into Fenway to face Boston. Not a good matchup by any stretch of the imagination. But Ryan Nelson has been like really good over about 10 starts now. So reason to believe at this price. Less so at this price. It's more challenging on the single starter site where you're just throwing him as an SP2 dart. I think you can get away with it. I wouldn't take him off the board here, but when I can just get these guys for cheaper in way better matchups, I won't care about the ownership difference there. It'll be negligible anyway. I just wouldn't take the risk for the higher salary. If he was priced like these guys, it would be a little bit closer of a discussion. Brian Bayo feels like a no against Arizona, especially at 88 on FanDuel, 77 on DraftKings, maybe a mix him in for a few shares. Festa against St. Louis I like a lot better, 71, 73 across sites. Think he's playable in both spots. Flexen is a no, Hendricks is a no, Povich is a no, Tyler Alexander's a no, Taiwan's a no, Kachanowicz and Kyle Freeland are all no's. So, cut off right about there. We'll talk about those pitchers as those games come up, but I really don't see it, even in the bargain bin, especially with all these other, like, actually good pitchers at those prices in good matchups. I tend to think you can punt that entire bottom of the board. Jake Swell saying Savali was good last time out against Cleveland. Revenge game. Savali reminds me a lot of Steve Trashel. Middle of the road, slightly below average, but will be pitcher forever as a 4-5 starter. That is a pretty apt comparison. Yeah. Definitely does fit that mold pretty well. Stephen Leibowitz has people talking, cutting grass outside, asking me to talk louder. We'll talk Bayo. That game is, what are they playing? I completely lost track of where that game is. We'll get there. Fuck are they playing? Arizona, that's right. There's Bayo. 8.7% walks. That's fairly high walk rate. 22% strikeout, about average. 4.80 ERA with a 3.74 xFIP. He's fine. He's about an average pitcher. Right about the average by stuff. Plus, little slight tick above. The swinging strike rate is good, but the whip and the walk rate are not. The strikeout rate doesn't really match the strike throwing ability. What he is good at is keeping the ball down, keeping it in the yard most of the time. This is probably a little bit of bad luck. I think Bayo's totally playable. I just don't really feel the need to draw down against the Diamondbacks in this ballpark with a pitcher that I don't fully, get excited about. But I don't think he's terrible. I do think he's a, solid enough, middle-of-the-road kind of average pitcher. But anyway, back to the top here. Kyle Freeland. No real reason to play Kyle Freeland in Yankee Stadium against the Yankees. He can give you depth. I will give him that much. 7 innings, 4 starts back. That was back at the end of July, but has been short-started each of the last few and hasn't really been good. Did have a 7-strikeout game, but only went 4 2/3 against the Mets on August 6th. Gave up 3 earned runs. 3 in the next one over just 3 2/3. 1 strikeout, 1 walk, 2 home runs allowed. And then faced San Diego, 5 innings but 5 earned runs allowed, 3 strikeouts, 3 walks. All of it amounts to an 18.5% strikeout rate for the year, a 5.97 ERA with a 4.27 xFIP, allowing a 3.45% home run rate on over-the-line hard hits, over-the-line exit velo, 9.2% barrels, a reasonable fly ball trajectory. Going to be pitching in Yankee Stadium against a lineup that includes these 3 home run hitters. Plus, it's getting Jazz Chisholm back today. Plus, it's got all these mix and match talents around those guys for very fair prices. Really like the upside for the Yankees at the highest total on the board. Really not going to consider Kyle Freeland. You don't do it here at 55. You don't do it there at 64. Carlos Rodon on the other side, though, 97 on both sites. Tremendous option. He's facing a Rockies lineup that has a 28.8% strikeout rate, for one thing. Yes, there are, as I said, some interesting young right-handed power bats in this lineup, although a lot of them don't appear to be in this lineup today. Jordan Beck is supposed to be a talented kid. He is right-handed down toward the bottom of the lineup, but the guys that I was looking for... Oh, there's Talia. Talia's a switch hitter. That's right. I was looking for the righty. He'll be taking at bats right-handed against Carlos Rodon, but he's a switch hitter. 4,700, 3,000 for him, 11.57 in the home run model. You've got Brenton Doyle, who's more obvious, Brendan Rodgers, who does hit the ball pretty hard, but doesn't see great results overall, and then Ezekiel Tovar, who's had a pretty good season. There's some decent bats in this lineup, but overall, it doesn't come together well. Probably a lot of it can be blamed on those ridiculously high strikeout rates up and down the lineup. Makes them not good for sequencing, makes it impossible to string runs together, create big innings, create big DFS scoring events. So really low end side for them. Really good opportunity for Rodon. He's got a 25.8% strikeout rate this season. That comes on 13.7% swinging strikes, 28.1% CSW, 4.34 ERA with a 4.28 xFIP. He's been a little bit vulnerable for runs this season. A little bit vulnerable to power as well. 9.9% barrels. Over the line there, basically the exact same numbers as his opponent, and a 4.19% home run rate. Definitely doesn't benefit from pitching in Yankee Stadium half his games. So I do think there's the downside that he could get nailed for a home run, and it just kind of depends on how many guys are on base as to whether that ruins your day or not at these prices. But there is a very high ceiling with this pitcher today, too. So you take some of the bad with the good. I wouldn't really be looking to stack Rockies against, but I think maybe in 150 lineups you could get away with doing it a couple of times. It's not really the spot to say if you take Carlos Rodon, you have to have a hedge stack of Rockies. He's way better than making that a necessity, especially on a giant slate like this. But if you were just looking at the Rockies as, hey, this is a team that's very, very cheap. They are playing in a hitter's haven kind of a ballpark, and they do have some power in the lineup against a pitcher who's given up a lot of power. There are justifications for maybe putting in a few shares of just contrarian Rockies. So we'll look at them that way. Tovar at 53-32 has 19 home runs, a 183 ISO, just a 92 WRC+, but his season hasn't been all that bad. He's made some nice steps forward, has some growth left to do. The 29.1% strikeouts need to come down, or the 3.1% walks need to go up. That'll help the on-base, it'll help the WRC+. He does one of those two things, and it'll completely normalize everything and make him look like a pretty good shortstop, and then he's got upside beyond that just based on his raw skills. At this stage, I think he's just playable in the leadoff role. Brendan Rodgers for 42-27 has 10 home runs on the season, but just a 138 ISO and a 94 WRC+. What I like about Rodgers and what I'll continue going back to is that 45.3% hard hit rate that aligns well with what he did for hard hits over the last 2 seasons. It hasn't turned into great results, but this is also not a terrible line. He's not a complete slouch. 435 okay plate appearances. He's not at all expensive. Second base eligible, so you just plug him in there, hope for some hard hits. Brent, and let's be honest, a hard hit in Yankee Stadium can turn into a home run pretty easily. Brenton Doyle at 55-33, 21 homers, 24 steals, a 204 ISO, a 110 WRC+. Been their best player this season. All the reason in the world to go to him if you're stacking Rockies. One of the reasons to consider stacking Rockies in general. McMahon for 44-3,000, 16 home runs. Lefty bat. I'm going to take some pokes at the short porch in right field. Remind myself of McMahon splits real quick. Six of his 16 home runs have come against same-handed pitching, and he's slashing 264, 335, 432 against fellow lefties versus 238, 335, 396 against righties, higher ISO, and a positive WRC plus against lefties. So Ryan McMahon remains a good option despite there being a lefty on the mound. Tolly's a good option for power. He's got an 11.57 in the home run model. He has hit 20 home runs in 317 plate appearances, 270 ISO. I haven't checked what Vientos costs yet, but he's at 47. I think Vientos was at 46 yesterday when we were talking about him or the day before. Similar in the home run totals, but Vientos is exceeding his numbers across the board in everything else. I mean, if I remember correctly, Vientos was, when we talked about him in the last 2 days, was it a 150 something WRC plus? So this is the power only version of that hitter. Jacob Stallings, 37-28, has 8 home runs, a decent slash line for 228 plate appearances. Moderate contact, but he's a very cheap catcher option. He does have a 120 WRC plus with a 195 ISO. He's having a pretty decent season for a part-time catcher. Nolan Jones, 38-25, pretty bad season for him compared to expectations coming off of that very good year last year, a 62 WRC plus, 201, 303, 310, pretty weak, but is hitting the ball hard, 45.5% hard hits, just striking out way too much, not really putting things together out there. Beck, like I said before, is a high-end prospect for this team. We've only had him for 111 plate appearances this year, 2 home runs, 3 stolen bases, and a 36 WRC+. plus. Needs to find some footing in the show. Aaron Schunk at the bottom, just a mix-and-match option for cheap pricing. The Yankees confirmed lineup. Gleyber Torres in the top spot. 21% Ks, 10% walks. That has rounded into form a little bit after the complete meltdown that he had to begin the season. But overall, this has been a bad year for Gleyber, coming off of what was a very good year. 238, 316, 348, 10% worse than average for run creation, 10 home runs on the board. Bad season. But as I keep saying, 316 on base, just needs to keep getting on base. Just push that on base percentage up if you land in this leadoff spot. Get on ahead of Soto, Judge, Stanton, Jazz. That's a very, very nice power core to be getting on base in front of. So just needs to focus on doing that. He remains a good correlated scoring play. He's very cheap at second base, and he does still have individual ability. Despite the bad season, despite the low-level output this year, there is still talent in there somewhere. It's just going to be playing for Seattle next year. Dribbling down my chin. Soto's a superstar, 65-46, 36 home runs. I believe something like 8 of his last 9 hits are home runs, and the other one was a 3-run double that he hit in the most recent game. Very expensive, difficult to put him and Judge together and still get to like high-end pitching, high-end second stack, but if you can figure it out, it's obviously extremely worth doing. 89% better than average for run creation for Soto, and then Judgy 124% better than average for run creation. Getting on base at a 465 clip, he's got 48 home runs, 101 runs, 118 ribbies if you care about those sorts of things. Just having an absolutely outrageous season. 17.52 in the home run model. Soto at 14.69, and don't sleep on Mr. Stanton again at 12.43. He's got 21 on the year, hit one yesterday, 238 ISO, 117 WRC+, 19% barrels, 53.2% hard hits, and swings the bat faster by, 4 miles an hour than anybody else in baseball. He's an outrageous power hitter. You put him in your lineup if you're stacking Yankees. 4,800, 33,000, he's not expensive enough. I know he's not consistent. I know he strikes out. I know he disappoints with runners on base because, as I highlighted yesterday, these two guys are always on base if they're not just hitting home runs ahead of them. So a lot of big opportunities for Stanton, and when you have that guy with that kind of power who gets that frequent opportunities to create big DFS scoring events, you just play him. And let other people make the mistake of not playing Giancarlo Stanton in Yankee stacks. Jazz Chisholm, 5,300 at third base on DK, 3,300 multi-position on FanDuel. Love the second base eligibility. 20 home runs, 27 steals, 187 ISO, 112 WRC+. Just coming back off the IL, made a nice recovery from that injury. They were worried that it was going to be multiple weeks. Ended up just being like 2 weeks, 10 days, something around there. We'll see what the form looks like. He was really playing well for the Yankees since the trade deadline before going down. So hopefully he bounces back and comes in exactly the same. Jose Trevino, mix and match quality catcher, 8 home runs on the season, a 105 WRC+. Volpe, mix and match shortstop, 41-31. He gives you counting stats, 11 homers, 23 steals, 250, 303, 389. Kind of limited output, not terrible, not good. Verdugo, pretty bad, 227, 288, 353, and 80 WRC+. And then DJ LeMahieu, another lost season at 189, 263, 249, and 52% worse than average for run creation. Top 5 of the Yankees lineup is pretty elite. That would be like the top overall segment, but overall it goes Yankees, Rodon, and really nothing but maybe a few just contrarian Rockies bats. Maybe, if you're building 150, 3 to 5 times, just, to throw some in there. But it's not a priority. And Kyle Freeland's a hard no. Astros, Hunter Brown, Orioles, Kate Povich. Let's see if we got lineups. Doesn't look like. No, actually, wait. This hasn't been loading. Let me reload labs. Still no. So Povich is a high-end prospect for the Orioles, but he has not been good in the show, really. 9 starts, 43 2/3. He's got a 5.77 ERA with a 5.85 xFIP, 15.5% strikeouts, 11.5% walks. Seems pretty problematic. Did have a good one against Boston, like I mentioned at the top, though. 2 earned runs over 6 1/3 in his most recent start. That was on the 17th after being out since the 29th. I think he was just sent down. I forget whether he was sent down or hurt. But 6 1/3 in that one. 2 earned runs on 6 hits, struck out 6, walked nobody, no home runs. That was against Boston in Baltimore. Does have that kind of ability, but just on such a deep pitching slate, it feels more like a why would you spot, especially with the low strikeout Astros in town the danger that these Astros have in the lineup. So I don't really like the spot for the lefty. He is extremely cheap for his talent on DraftKings, despite what the numbers might look like. I'm sure he's going to be unpopular, but even as a value dart, it just seems thin on a slate like this. Hunter Brown on the other side, 94. If you trust it, you can target the Orioles for a few shares. They've got not really a high strikeout rate, just around average 21.7, but the 25.5 that Brown has put up this year tells me he can find a few strikeouts, total out to a decent game against this team. It's just they're a deadly good lineup, so really challenged. It's another spot where it just feels more like a why would you? And he's not really discounted by comparison to the very top guys on the entire slate who are in much, much better matchups. So, yeah, I believe he's got the talent. No, it wouldn't knock me out of my chair if he had a successful day today. But he's got to do a lot of hard work against this Orioles lineup at 9,400 to really pay it off and be, in slate winning kind of position. So it just doesn't feel like the right play. 3.82 ERA, 3.51 xFIP, 25.5% strikeouts. Walking a few too many at 8.8%, but he's been terrific at limiting barrels, limiting hard hits, inducing weak and medium contact, limiting home runs. That's what all that adds up to, obviously. Brown definitely really took a big step forward mid-season, and one rough game since then. Really hasn't looked back. At least 8 strikeouts in 3 of his last 5 starts. 2 8s and a 9 in there with a 4 and a 6 in there. It's difficult to endorse. I think it's more just about the price. Even if he was 400 cheaper, 9,089, 9,091, something like that, I'd be a little bit more enthusiastic about it, just where he fits in on the board. Getting him there when I've got that entire run of pitchers for cheaper above him on both sites, plus these guys at not much more, or at least these two, makes it challenging. Astros bats definitely in play against Povich. Their run total was 4.40. Not crazy high in just the sense of the entire season, but on this slate, we actually only have 2 teams above 5, couple of high 4s. Those mid 4s are definitely in play. Jose Altuve from the top, 54.36. Fairly priced, slashing 297, 350, 435. We've talked about the dip in ISO this season. Power's been out a little bit in terms of extra base hits. He's got 16 homers and 18 steals, though. By and large, still doing a lot of Jose Altuve things out there. 124 WRC+. Alex Bregman at 53.34 has 20 homers, a 187 ISO, a 117 WRC+. Completely looks like Alex Bregman again. 53.34, no reason not to include him if you're stacking up the Astros. Jordan Alvarez, 62.36, 25 homers, 239 ISO, 162 WRC+ on the season. He's just utterly elite. Strikes out at just 14.9%, walks 11% of the time, crushes the ball when he makes contact. 62.36 are correct prices, if not on FanDuel at least. A couple bucks cheap for Alvarez's talent. Even lefty-lefty, by the way, again, as I've highlighted a number of different times, lefty-lefty for Alvarez does not matter. Jainer Diaz, 48.29, talked about him a lot this season. 15 home runs, a 159 ISO, creating runs 22% better than average. Basically hitting cleanup for this team almost every day now at a very fair price with catcher eligibility on DK, has first base eligibility as well. So if they do put, what's-his-face, Caratini in the lineup alongside Jainer Diaz like they've been doing, you can put them both in the lineup on DK now. On FanDuel, catcher 2,900, doesn't matter obviously position-wise. Jeremy Pena at 45.28, mix and match quality shortstop with a little bit more than that. He's like the first guy on the above average list. 275, 319, 399, a 105 WRC plus on the season, 12 homers, 15 steals. He's all right. 3,300, 2,700 for Jake Myers, mix and match quality outfielder, 12 homers, 9 steals, but below average WRC plus. Shea Whitcomb for just 26 at third base. It's difficult to skip Alex Bregman for him, but that would be the case in most positions. The guy I'd most likely skip for him is Pena. That's the case on FanDuel where Whitcomb is a shortstop. He is a good player. He's a kid who was tearing up the minors and really rocketed up the prospect board for them this year. In 22 plate appearances in the show so far, he's been pretty good. We'll see what he's got to offer overall, but he's made very, very good contact so far. 263, 364, 368. Creator runs 15% better than average and amounts to a run and 2 RBIs. But the kid's cheap for the talent, so it helps stack up the very top of this lineup, if nothing else. You also have Zach DeZenzo, a third shortstop in this lineup on FanDuel at 2,500. He's a little bit lower end than the other guys are. At first base for 2,300 on FanDuel, you don't have another first baseman unless you're putting Jainer Diaz there, which is probably the route that I would take if I was stacking this team on DraftKings. 47.6% hard hits in his 34 plate appearances. He's got a home run on the board. He's very cheap. That's about all he gives you. Mauricio Dubon, mix and match caliber option with multi-position eligibility, but 80 WRC plus over 334 plate appearances with just 4 home runs and 3 steals, so it's not a ton of DFS output there. On the Orioles side, I do think you can go to the O's. It's not a good spot. It's probably more a game where if Hunter Brown fails, it still just looks like 4 runs. They lose the game 4-3. So I don't really need to load up on the O's like I normally would be considering. But they don't project poorly. You've got 2 guys over the magic number for home runs despite Brown's propensity to keep the ball in the park. And then you've got some very good players for fair prices. So while they are diminished in terms of where they would normally land in stack rankings, I do think they're playable. They're probably going to be lower owned than you would normally find them. But it's more of a case where they're just kind of in the mix and take what you get. Make sure you don't get too much. Cowser, 4,800, 3,000, 18 home runs, a 199 ISO, 118 WRC+. Pretty good investment in the outfield. Monster contact numbers over his 435 plate appearances now. 7.90 on the home run model. He strikes out a lot, but he draws a decent walk rate. Putting up a very, very solid season. Another one of the young bats for this team. Santander at 54-36 has 37 home runs on the season, a 284 ISO. He's been absolutely crushing the ball all year. Only 5,400 on DraftKings. It's expensive, but it's honestly a little light for the output that you're getting from him this year. 3,600 on FanDuel, you could say the same thing. Gunnar at 6,043 is a star, 33 home runs, 15 stolen bases, a 268 ISO. He's created runs 62% better than average. High priority shortstop in a lower priority lineup. I don't know that I would take him as like a one-off here. Obviously, I would take him. Right, if it was, hey, you can have Gunnar for free in the shortstop role, you take him. But I don't know that I go out of my way to like roster Gunnar one-off shares, given the remaining salary and an open shortstop position. Again, the matchup against Brown, not great. Not great for power output, which is, I want that opportunity for the big knock. He does have the 11 plus in the home run model, so I mean, there is opportunity there. But as probability goes, it's a little bit lessened against this pitcher. O'Hearn at 37-29 is very good. 12 home runs on the season. A 167 ISO is all right. 124 WRC plus is very good. 387 plate appearances. He's hitting the ball pretty hard. Not at all expensive at 3,700, 2,900 in first base or the outfield. Adley at 51-31, highly playable catcher with 18 home runs, a 111 WRC plus. One of the top bats at his position in all of baseball. Ryan Mountcastle, 42-3,000. Better than a mix and match quality first baseman. I know the numbers aren't great with just 13 home runs and 485 plate appearances this year, but he does have a 106 WRC plus, so he's creating runs in a positive sense. 8.8% barrels and 44.7% hard hits are appealing, especially when I know it's coming from a hitter who is way over those 2 marks the last 2 seasons. So I know there's more power in that bat. He's fairly low strikeout, low walk, so he puts a lot of well-struck balls in play. He's a player with maybe a big ceiling on the right day, who doesn't necessarily, climb the stairs and go up to the second floor of the house all that often, to make it a really clunky analogy. He doesn't have like a gigantic basement. There's nothing he does overly poorly, but he doesn't excel as much as he should. Jackson Holiday, 36-28. It's difficult because the prices are up a little bit from where they were when he was rock bottom when he first came back up. Now we're looking at a player who's slashing 174, 231, 339 in the show over 117 plate appearances, striking out 34.2% of the time. He is still one of the top prospects in all of baseball. He's hit 5 home runs all since coming back. But we really do need to see the consistency start to arrive in the show. What I really like is the 11.6% barrels, the 44.9% hard hits in a small sample of batted ball events. But he's very high strikeout, pretty low walk so far, very low in terms of the on base and the average, obviously, in the small sample. But there's a tremendous amount of talent there for the money. Cedric Mullins, former 30-30 guy, 13 homers and 23 steals this season. At worst, he's a mix and match outfielder for cheap pricing with a lot of individual counting stat ability. Ramon Urias provides some cheap, sneaky power at the end of the lineup if you're stacking this team. But again, not a great day for power given what Hunter Brown's been able to do as far as inducing weak and medium contact and missing barrels this season. Brown? Nah, let's go Astros bats, Hunter Brown just because of how that price fits into the board. And then Orioles bats and probably no Cade Povich. Angels and the Blue Jays. Do not have the Angels. Blue Jays is in there already. It's Chris Bassett. It's Jack Kachanowicz. Can't say that name right for some reason. I just want to put the CH at the front. Kachanowicz. Jack here has a 20.2% strikeout rate in his 4 outings. Excuse me, a 20.2 would be all right. He's thrown 20 and 2/3 innings. He's got a 7.8% strikeout rate. That's not good. No strikeouts in 6 innings in his last start that came against the Braves on the 18th. Went 6, gave up just 2 earned runs, 7 hits, gave up a homer, walked 3, and again, no strikeouts. 7 and 2/3 in a start against the Nationals. 2 earned runs, 2 strikeouts, 1 walk. 4 innings and 3 innings in his first 2 starts of the year. They came on July 11th and July 20th. In terms of eating innings, I guess he's got that ability, at least as demonstrated over the those last 2 outings. What does he throw? Apologies, I really don't know this pitcher all that well. Almost exclusively a sinker curveball pitcher. I'm just suddenly intrigued by that depth. There's really very, very limited upside for any kind of DFS scoring unless he's giving you 7+ innings. But the fact that he went 7 and 2/3 2 starts ago and then 6, despite being pretty mediocre in this last one, is at least intriguing for the depth at 5,000 on DraftKings. 65 on FanDuel, I think you're really stretching it, and I wouldn't do it over here because you're really, again, just chasing 7 innings and hope he doesn't give up any runs to a good enough Blue Jays team that's drawing one of the higher totals on the board at 4.96. This did come down because there's no Vladdy in the lineup. It is a flawed version of the Blue Jays lineup. 22.1% strikeouts, but that's being pushed up by some smaller samples down here. Some of their hitters up toward the top of the lineup are still very low strikeout. But you do have a slightly more targetable Blue Jays lineup for strikeout upside. Again, this is not the pitcher to find that with. The 4.44% home run rate comes on a ton of hard hits and exit velo, but with the idea that he's throwing almost exclusively sinker curveball, I believe in the low launch angle. I think that's what he's trying to do on the mound. So that means that this is probably, again, in a very small sample, a little bit of happenstance. If his stuff is working right, the 3-degree average launch is what's going to be coming through, and then we don't care as much about the hard hits in the exit velo. I'm in no way endorsing this spot. I think if you're a 150 lineup max player and you're not at all risk averse, it's at least on the DraftKings board as a SP2 extreme dart throw. There's almost no ceiling with it. I really question if I should even be saying that. Bassett, definitely a little bit more believable. 8,800 on DK, just 85 on FanDuel. For the idea that, a guy who is capable of eating innings. That said, he hasn't really done so in 4 of his last 5 starts. He went 7 against Baltimore 3 starts back. Since then, he's gone 4 against Oakland, 5 against the Cubs at Wrigley. The Oakland game, he gave up 7 earned runs, struck out 5, walked 2. The game at Wrigley, 3 earned runs on 5 hits, struck out 5. That was an okay start.
took the loss. No quality start, obviously. The game against the O's, 7 innings, 2-run ball, 9 strikeouts. That's a high-end Chris Bassitt day. Faced the Orioles at Baltimore the game before that one, just 4, gave up 5 earned, 3 strikeouts. He hasn't been quite as good for depth, but he fairly reliably, at least through the middle of the season, was completing the 6th inning. And has the upside to give you 8 against a team like this. 139 innings in 25 starts at 22% strikeout rate. Walking too many at 8.9%, a 4.34 ERA and a 4.26 xFIP. Looks very much like Chris Bassitt, as does the strike throwing numbers. Not bad for premium contact and power. This is about average in terms of the trajectory, the barrels, the contact. 93.76, not a surprising rating by Stuff Plus. He's just decidedly average, but he doesn't need to be all that good to beat this team and to find some strikeout upside as well. 25.2% strikeout rate for this projected version of the Angels lineup. Bassett's in play. You could do worse. You could also do better. Stacking the Angels is also in play against Bassitt, though. We've seen some downside from him this year. He's given up earned runs in the vast majority of his starts, with a couple of blips for really bad performance. So I think the Angels draw a little bit of upside. A couple of 6s in the home run model there around the obvious guys: Taylor Ward, Zach Neto, Logan O'Hoppe. It's just a really imbalanced lineup. There's not that much talent. They're not very good at sequencing or getting on base. So you just got to play it on faith and just cheap pricing, but it is at least an angle into the slate for that. Taylor Ward at just 3,900, 2,900 across sites. 16 home runs in 516 plate appearances. The vast majority of that came at the beginning of the season when he was actually still good. He's been in a total tailspin, 97 WRC+, but he's still a high priority bat if you're going to this team. Zach Neto at 3,000. Very good pricing, especially on DraftKings at 4,300 for a guy with 19 home runs and 22 steals, a 200 ISO, a 119 WRC+. If you're just putting together a lineup of just like, I want to take the Mark Vientoses of the world, the guys who are just underpriced and I don't care about stacking, and I'm just grabbing one-offs across the board and paying for 2 great pitchers kind of a lineup, he's very much in play for the shortstop role in that kind of a lineup on DraftKings. For the record, that is not how you build the DFS lineup in baseball, but I just wanted to illustrate that he's in that group of guys at this shortstop position, kind of uniquely offset from some of the other cheap shortstops. Nolan Shanuel, 35-27, 12 home runs, a 349 on base. There's really nothing wrong with that option at those cheap prices. Lefty bat against Chris Bassitt. He's got a 108 WRC+. He's not a power hitter, but he's a guy who's going to reliably put the ball in play or draw a walk and get to first base. And he doesn't really cost anything. No issues with it. Anthony Rendon, major issues. 3,400, 2,500. Just think he's a waste of time. 69 WRC+ on the season. No homers, 5 steals. Big fat who cares. Logan O'Hoppe, 39-28, 17 home runs, a 173 ISO, 108 WRC+. Definitely a good option. Cheap catcher, 3,900 for a catcher with his kind of power. Not a bad price. That's another one that could be thrown into that basket of just really underpriced players on DraftKings. 11.7% barrels, 46.4% hard hits. His power output is very, very real. Honestly, the 173 ISO is low for that kind of contact, so he's got more to give than what we've seen from him so far. Mickey Moniak, 28-25, mix and match at the absolute best. Hasn't really been good all season, 72 WRC+. Joe Adell, the much better option down there. The numbers don't look all that dissimilar, but he's got a much higher ISO. He's got a 90 WRC+ by comparison to the 72. He's got 18 homers and 14 steals in more opportunities, but not that many more. It's just the average, the on base are pretty pathetic. But way higher ceiling, making very good contact, 11.7% barrels and 45.3% hard hits, despite the up and down nature of the player. Nico hit his first, I think that was his first hit and his first home run yesterday. We talked about him being, I think it was 0 for 13 going into yesterday, so it looked like he went, 1 for 4 with a homer? 23 WRC+. Kid seems like he can hit a little bit, making good contact in a very limited number of batted ball events so far. Obviously, striking out problematically so far, but it's a very, very small sample. He's just cheap, a lefty bat if you're going to this team. You can mix him in. Michael Stefanich, not really much of a hitter over 86 plate appearances. Mix and match caliber second baseman at best. The Vladdy-less Blue Jays are kind of challenging. As much as the run total would suggest that it's a good spot to stack against Kachanowicz, as much as the, obviously the numbers would suggest that, I don't know. Springer's come around a little bit for the season. He's up to 17 home runs, 13 steals, just a 96 WRC plus. Dalton Varsho does have power from the left side. He's got 15 home runs, but he doesn't make good contact. 5.2% barrels, 32.2% hard hits. Strikes out a fair amount of the time at 25.8%, although he's a non-threatening strikeout pitcher. 195 ISO on the season. He's okay, but he's definitely inconsistent. Kuchanowicz, by the way, in Double-A this year, not even Triple-A. 102 innings in 18 starts in Double-A, had a 19.5% strikeout rate and a 6.1% walk rate. So it's not just small sample that he's not a strikeout pitcher, but he's a little bit better than this. Maybe you can give him credit up to 1 in 5, 1 in 5.5 kind of a level. Spencer Harwitz, good option if you're stacking up Blue Jays. You don't want to be skipping Spencer Harwitz that often. 3,800, 3,100, second and first base eligibility on both sites. With no Vladdy in the lineup, it makes it easier to stick him at first base if you want to, but I definitely prefer him at second. 355 on base, a 124 WRC plus, a guy who gets involved very, very regularly, really good at getting on base and putting the ball in play. Limited for power, but a good spot in the lineup. Alejandro Kirk at 3,300, 2,700. Don't really understand exactly what they're doing, sticking him in the cleanup role. I guess they're trying to ride the contact a little bit. 41% hard hits, 7.6% barrels this year in 277 chances. It's amounted to 4 home runs, a 101 ISO, 11 points below average for run creation. Doesn't really get on base, so it's not a situation where they're saying, well, Spencer's definitely going to clear the bases of these guys, so we'll have him reset the table. Doesn't really make sense to me to have Alejandro Kirk hitting cleanup. Not that there's a logical candidate down lineup. If it's anybody, it's probably Joey Loperfido. At least there's the idea of power upside, but then you'd be running 3 lefties out. What they should probably have done was go Springer, Harwitz, Kirk, or like Ernie Clement or somebody in the 3 spot would probably be how I'd do it. I'd move Ernie to the 3 spot and then just drop Varsho to the 4 spot. Probably a bit, or move Will Wagner up, honestly. It's a weird lineup. Wagner for 23-26 has had pretty successful 29 plate appearances. In AAA this season, just 31 plate appearances. AA this season, no, sorry, that was a split between teams, not between levels. 324 plate appearances came with Houston in AAA. Had 5 home runs and 3 steals, but was slashing 307, 424, 429, and creating runs 22% better than average. So he's another guy that kind of fits into what this team is really looking for in terms of putting the ball in play, getting on base. But the power is a problem. Power's a problem here, power's a problem here, power's a problem here. Even up here, you could argue, at least with the results this season. And then obviously you look down lineup and there's just no output. So that's where I land on, I don't know that this team is necessarily a good DFS option today. You're really going to need to find it through an extreme amount of sequencing and just this guy completely melting down and then whoever follows him continuing that trend, because there's not a ton of power upside. Not that is not to say that these guys can't hit home runs today. They obviously can. But it's not the best team to make that bet with. Really limited. The home run model tells you the full story. Ernie Clement is just low strikeout, extreme low walk, a lot of balls in play, slashing 272, 295, 437, 4% better than average for run creation. He's hit 10 home runs, but not really a power hitter. 3.8% barrels, 24% hard hits. A lot of happenstance in those home runs. Loperfido is supposed to be a power bat. We've gotten 3 out of him this season in 176 chances. Needs to find some consistency, really get the engine going again, but he's very cheap. Lefty bat to throw at this, AA righty. Addison Barger, 25-23, mix and match. Stuart Baroa, 22-22 across sites. Think it's just interesting and fun that this team has yet another next generation kid. He's the son of Geronimo Baroa, who you might remember from the late 90s, early 2000s, I want to say. Maybe a little bit later than that. But Baroa, not a tremendous option. This goes Bassett, Blue Jays bats, Angels bats. Extremely risky $5,000 dart throw for Kuchanowicz on your DraftKings slate. Don't do that too often. Again, that's really just a play for people who are building out the full-on 150 and you are, a big risk taker and not risk averse. Power says the Cards projected correct except for Victor Scott in hitting ninth for Tommy Pham. I'd much rather have Tommy Pham. Text projected lineup is correct. Dennis calling out my my use of cliches. If there's no ceiling, the sky is the limit, right? I guess so. Power doing yeoman's work dropping the lineups into the chat. I appreciate it, buddy. Cubs and the Marlins. Max Meyer on the mound for the Marlins, pushing a lot of power upside. You can see, what is that, 5 guys above the magic number in the Cubs lineup for home run upside today. Pretty good sequencing team as well. Pretty good on base percentages for basically all of those power bats. Not a bad option. I think we've probably gotten into more trouble than we've gotten good results from the Cubs this year, but they look somewhat appealing. 4.18 implied total, not one of the absolute lowest on the board, not one of the highest either. Lineup that, again, has been very up and down throughout the season, but there is good, mid-range power through every one of those hitters. Every one of those guys gets on base at a pretty good clip. They're facing a pitcher who over 40 1/3 in 8 starts this year has a 5.20 home run rate on nearly 50% hard hits. Remember, we're looking for 40 here. We're looking for 90 here. 91.4 miles an hour of exit velo. 14.4% barrels allowed so far this season. It's been problematic for Max Meyer. Not exactly a hitter's park, which could be, a little bit of an issue for, and probably why that run total's not a half a run higher. In his last start, Meyer gave up 2 home runs to the Mets. Struck out 3, walked 3, 4 earned runs on 6 hits over 4 innings. 6 1/3 against the Padres before that. No homer allowed, 4 strikeouts, no walks, but gave up 4 earned on 7 hits. 6 earned on 8 hits over 4 innings against the Reds before that. Home run allowed, 2 strikeouts, 3 walks. A 3 home run game against the Braves. Did strike out 7 in that one, only managed to only give up 4 runs, but problematic for power. Cubs do still have their work cut out for them. We need some of these guys to be on base when the other ones hit home runs. The way DFS goes, it'll be Pete Crow Armstrong that hits his 6th home run of the year and has the gigantic day when nobody has him, and it'll pay off the bottom of the lineup, not the top. But right now, we're kind of focused on that group up there. Crow Armstrong, really just here to play defense, steal the occasional base, doesn't get on enough to really support any kind of DFS upside. Same is true for Miguel Amaya outside of the stolen base part. Doesn't really get on base, doesn't really do that much of anything. The occasional power stroke, 6 home runs on the year, but very limited weak contact down from the bottom of the lineup for 22-24 at the catcher spot. So pretty skippable bat down there. Makes it a little bit shorter of a stack depending on what we actually get. Do we have this confirmed? As I'm talking it through, we don't. It's probably going to be like this. The Cubs fairly consistent lately. But as the lineup goes up, I do start to like it more and more. Kind of obvious statement there. But even Dansby Swanson with his terrible season so far, 230, 299, 358, just an 85 WRC plus. 10 homers and 12 steals. Very disappointing numbers across the board for Dansby. Still making pretty okay contact. The hard hits are actually up over last year. The barrels are down. I would trade that the other way and take the quality. But there's still talent there, and he's gotten so cheap that it's okay that his season numbers aren't that good. You can just buy the ceiling for the cheap price, so he's a playable shortstop option. Nico, I would skip Nico more often than I would skip Dansby, honestly. Despite the 6-point difference in their WRC+, they're both below average. Dansby hits decidedly for more power for their careers, and even this year, 127 ISO is not good, but it's better than a .91. Nico's hit 5 home runs, stolen 23 bases. He gets on a little bit more frequently than Dansby does this year, but overall, Swanson's the better of the 2 players. There's a much bigger price difference between the 2 on DraftKings than there is on FanDuel. They're both in the mix for shares, but I prefer Swanson to Nico on both sides. Then you get to the good hitters in the top 5. Isaac Paredes for just 42,000. Third base eligible on DraftKings. First and third is interesting on FanDuel, but you've got multiple first base options in this lineup. 18 homers for Paredes, a 180 ISO, 116 WRC+. Where are we at since joining the Cubs? First Cubs game was on July 30th. Since joining the Cubs, Paredes is slashing 141, 225, 268 with a 41 WRC+, a 127 ISO, and just 2 home runs. Not great for a trade deadline acquisition. Just 4,200, 3,000. We talked about the fact that most of his home runs, he greatly benefited from a specific spot in the outfield in Tampa Bay. And without that to target, maybe it's a little bit of a diminishment here that is actually based on something real. He's more skippable than I would have otherwise thought a few weeks ago in this lineup, but he does rate out to an 11.92 in the home run model based on his past history and his track record, and he is facing a very, very gettable pitcher. So it more likely falls into a I'll take shares if I'm stacking Cubs, and I'll let other people leave them by the wayside if they're stacking Cubs, and that'll be a differentiation point for me within Cub stacks that I already think will be a little bit offset for ownership. Cody at 5,200 is problematically priced on DraftKings considering the output this season. 275, 332, 427, 13 home runs, a 111 WRC plus, and a 153 ISO. Compare him to Mark Antos, let's say. That said, he is still very good. He's still a former MVP. He doesn't really strike out. Doesn't crush the ball when he makes contact, but he puts the ball in play pretty regularly and does have big upside and a 10.42 in the home run model. Like him a lot better on FanDuel for the 32. Seiya Suzuki is underpriced. 4,500, 3,000. He's hit 16 home runs, stolen 10 bases, created runs 23% better than average. Solid 197 ISO and a 337 on base, and hits the ball very, very hard. Strikes out a lot, but a very high-end player with a good, nice high ceiling for the cheap pricing. Michael Busch at 4,000, 2,800. The FanDuel price is outrageously low. He's hit 16 home runs, has a 193 ISO, 124 WRC plus, 12.5% barrels. It's really all I need to know. 30.7% strikeouts is a little challenging, but he's drawing his walks, getting on base at a very strong clip. He's a very strong run creator. So no issues with the strikeout rate. Love the power upside for 2,800 at first base. That's a buy. 4,000, same thing. And then Ian Happ at the top of the board, having a very nice season. 22 home runs, 219 ISO, 122 WRC plus. Making extremely good contact with 13% barrels to lead the team, 43.7% hard hits to sit second on the team. For 3,400, he's got a 14 in the home run model, 4,600 on DraftKings, also cheap over there, or average-ish kind of pricing, not bad pricing. I like Hap to start any Cub stack. Top 5 is really where you want to live, but some interesting mix and match options there, and then 2 also rans down the bottom of the lineup, but some appeal here in the Cubs against Meyer. The Marlins against Hendricks, a lot less appealing, despite Hendo being a pretty similar kind of a target as far as the pitching quality goes. A 6.35 ERA, but a 4.36 xFIP. Obviously, 2 runs of separation between the ERA and the xFIP is weird. Means he's gotten a little bit unlucky, but even this is not a very good number. Comes with 16.1% strikeouts. He's just a pitch-to-contact kind of a pitcher. 4.58% home runs despite inducing weak and medium contact pretty frequently. Means when he makes a mistake, the ball travels out of the stadium. That's not as problematic against a team like the Marlins and in this ballpark, but you do have a guy like Jake Berger who could take advantage. Jesus Sanchez, to some degree, could take advantage. There's a little bit of threat here. In no way would I want to roster Kyle Hendricks on the mound, not at 61, not at 67. I just don't see the ceiling even against a Marlins lineup with a 24.8% strikeout rate. Deep slate, we could just do better for cheap pitching, so I think we're going away from that, but it doesn't necessarily lead us running to the Marlins lineup. Xavier Edwards from the top of Miami, 4,900, 3,100 across sites. Having a good year, 201 plate appearances, slashing 345, 425, 433. Just kind of a non-threatening hitter in terms of creating big scoring events when he's not just providing correlated opportunities. 425 on base is obviously terrific, but then he needs these guys to come through and do something to help him come around. 143 WRC plus. He's obviously been successful in creating runs, but 1 home run, 21 steals. Makes him more of a mix and match shortstop, and 49 is a little bit aggressive of a price. The multi-position, the second base eligibility at 31 is a little bit more reasonable on FanDuel. Jake Berger at 52-33 has 25 home runs, really pulled his season together. He was really scuffling through basically the entire first half. Now we're up to 13.2% barrels, 47.6% hard hits at 229 ISO, 113 WRC plus. Looking a lot more like the Jake Berger we saw through basically all of last year. Jesus Sanchez still crushes the ball, 12.7% barrels and 52.7% hard hits to lead this team. 15 home runs doesn't really match that kind of contact. The 173 ISO doesn't really match that kind of contact. 26.2% strikeouts is way up from where we were hoping he would land, kind of looking a lot like last year, and he's walking less. Not a good season out of Sanchez, but he's cheap. You could buy a little bit of home run opportunity against Kyle Hendricks, 7.55 in the home run model. Jonah Bride for 35.29, hitting the ball not all that hard. 4.8% barrels, 36.1% hard hits, 5 home runs in 130 plate appearances. He's seen better results than what his contact has looked like. 173 ISO is probably, the more correct number than the 5 home runs in the small sample. 122 WRC plus. He's been all right for this team, but overall on a very large 14-game slate, kind of falls by the wayside. Connor Norby, a high-end kid, they acquired him from Baltimore, 3,000, 2,300, very, very cheap on both sites, 23 on FanDuel at second base especially. Over 45 plate appearances, 2 home runs at 200 ISO, that's really all you need to care about. Kyle Stowers, 25-23, a little bit of lefty pop, hasn't done much in 103 chances this year. Very, very high strikeout at 37.9%, but Hendo, not exactly a strikeout pitcher. Derek Hill barreling the ball fairly well at 9.6% in his 116 chances this year. 4 home runs, a 165 ISO, mix and match caliber outfielder down lineup. Otto Lopez, 31-26, 4 positions on FanDuel, just second base on DraftKings, not ideal. 3 home runs and 14 steals, pretty limited anyway, so who cares? Nick Fortes, 23-21, don't really need to go to the bottom of the Marlins lineup to find a catcher. Cubs bats way over the Marlins bats, but the Marlins bats are on the board more than either of those pitchers are. Both of these lineups are in, which is good. So we talked about Bayo briefly at the start of the show. He was getting some enthusiasm in the chat, it seemed like. Yeah, Sox is in there already. So for the season, Bayo again, 22.2% strikeouts. Slightly above average rating by Stuff Plus, a 4.80 ERA, but a nice tidy 3.74 xFIP that's a full run lower. Good strike numbers, 12% swinging, 28.6% CSW. Giving up a little bit of premium contact in terms of the hard hits and the exit velo. The exit velo is actually not even bad. The launch angle is very good, 5.9 degree average launch. That means those 3.52% home runs that he's allowed probably is more along the lines of happenstance and mistakes than it is, a problematic, habitual home run provider, home run giver-upper. So 77-88. On DraftKings, he's a lot more playable than he is on FanDuel. The 88, I'm not really a fan of him at that price. He's at least in the mix for some SP2 shares at 77, but the ballpark's working against him. The run total in general for this game is working against him. 9.5 runs is the top of the board. Fenway has played extremely well for offense this year, facing a decent Diamondbacks lineup with a suddenly surging Corbin Carroll. Some good lefties in the lineup. This is a real challenge on such a deep slate. This is all right. I'll give it that much. And then Nelson on the other side. Again, we got to talk about him. He is going to be equally, if not more, challenged by the ballpark in the opposing lineup. No doubt about it. Again, the Red Sox at 5.02, one of just 2 teams above a 5 in the Vegas lines. But Nelson's been good. Going back to this run really started on July 2nd. Went 5 in that game, gave up an earned run to the Dodgers, 3 strikeouts and a walk. 1 earned run on 3 hits over 6 2/3 to the Padres and struck out 5. 7 innings against the Blue Jays, 3 earned runs on 5 hits, perfectly acceptable. 5 strikeouts, no walks. 5 2/3 against the Cubs. 1 run allowed on 3 hits, struck out 9. Then the game we talked about him for, after those starts, was against the Royals. We were calling it a challenge spot. It wasn't a bad start. He only struck out 2 when he walked 2. That's not great, but he ended up going 6. He gave up 4 runs on 9 hits. It's not a good start. It didn't win us slates that day, but it's not a complete meltdown. Came off of that one, faced Washington, went another 7 innings, shutout ball, 2 hits, another 9 strikeout game. Came off of that one, faced the Pirates, another day we talked about them. 4 earned runs in that one as well. Came on 6 hits, struck out 7 though, went 5 innings. Not a great DFS start, but not completely off the mark for cheap pricing. If he gave you that for 67 today, you wouldn't be happy about it, but if they added the win bonus to it for him, let's say, you'd be a little happier. 7 1/3, 2 starts ago, came against Philadelphia. 2 earned runs, 3 hits, 9 strikeouts. Last start came against Tampa Bay, 6 strikeouts against that low-end high strikeout team, but just allowed 1 earned run on 5 hits, 6 1/3 innings. And this is a pitcher who, when we looked at it at the very beginning, right before that Royals game, so 3-4 starts into his run of being an improved pitcher, it was noteworthy that he had changed up his pitch mix. He was locating his fastball at the top of the zone basically exclusively. He was doing really interesting things. So anytime we can spot an uptick in performance and then trace it back to a noteworthy change that the pitcher's made, either in the type of pitch, the velo, et cetera, et cetera. You know, when you talk about, he lost 1.5 miles of velocity and 50 rotations, rotations, whatever it is, lost a little bit of spin rate. If you factor those things in, you've also got to factor in he is doing very different things strategically with how he's using his pitches on the mound. To me, that's almost more important with a guy who does have an effective pitch mix, just never really figured out how to balance it correctly, how to tunnel and everything correctly. So just pitching better, I'm kind of at least intrigued to see how he does. I don't necessarily know that I go out and rush to roster a ton of it at 84 on FanDuel. 67 on DraftKings is a lot more tempting. If I was building a bunch of DraftKings lineups on tonight, he'd probably be in the mix. But it's just more another spot of, I'm curious to see him get through this one, rather than I need to have it for DFS. I do think there's upside. He is very cheap, and I think there's a little something here. But let's see how he does. Greatly prefer bats on both sides of this one, of course. Red Sox most particularly, but the Diamondbacks are playable. It's not a great spot in terms of the power upside, just given that Bayo, as discussed, does keep the ball on the ground pretty effectively. But he has been vulnerable to the mistakes, to the home runs. So maybe a little bit of potential there. I mentioned Corbin Carroll off the top. Since the end of July, 260, 333, 589. His creative runs 50% better than average. Has a 329 ISO, 6 home runs. He scored 24 runs, 13 RBIs, stolen 1 base, caught stealing once. So, looking a lot more like Corbin Carroll than he did for the first 3 quarters of the season. That puts him at just 222, 310, 396 with a 97 WRC plus, 14 homers and 21 steals. But I mean, this has gotten better than I thought it was going to end up looking like. Jake McCarthy having a very good season at 304, 376, 457, a 133 WRC plus. 8 home runs and 18 steals. He's giving you a little bit more than, just another outfielder caliber production. That said, he's priced up to 4,700 now. That feels a little high. 3,000 on FanDuel is a little bit more reasonable relative than that number is. The idea that he'd be offset by just 100 from Jock Peterson, who I definitely think against a righty is a better hitter. I don't know. Look at these numbers side by side and tell me those guys should be $100 apart. 304 versus 292, 8 home runs versus 20 home runs in 3 more plate appearances. A 376 on base for Jake McCarthy, which is very, very good, but a 406 on base for Jock Peterson. A 457 slug versus a 553 slug. A 153 ISO versus a 261 ISO. A 133 WRC plus versus a 165. Do they not think about these things when they price these players? It's bizarre that those 2 players playing the same position, both left-handed against the same right-handed pitcher, would be priced just $100 apart. But they are. Anyway, Jock is a priority if you're going to Diamondbacks. Love the option. 13.7% barrels, 46.6% hard hits. One of the better seasons we've seen from Jock Peterson. I continue to think that they should just take the shackles off and let him play every damn day and forget about the platoon thing, and let's just see how he does, considering how good he's been all season. Josh Bell, 41, 28, 18 home runs, a 171 ISO, and 98 WRC plus. Really pulled himself together after getting out of Miami, but it's still, pretty big mediocre season. Lourdes Gurriel, decent amount of power, 15 home runs, 7 steals, 274, 312, 418. He's doing everything just kind of okay. He's got ability in each category, on average power. We've seen better seasons in each thing from him. This season, it's just kind of okay across the board. but he is low strikeout, low walk, put the ball in play, just under 40% hard hits. Not a bad option. Adrian Del Castillo, 4,500, 3,200 across sites, 361, 425, 667, a 201 WRC plus in his 40 plate appearances, but he's hit 3 home runs already. He's been crushing the ball. I think he's still probably just mix and match caliber, and you're talking about a spot where there's not a ton of home run upside. But if you're stacking up Diamondbacks, you could do worse than including him for just 4,500, where you have to play catchers at least. 4,200 for Eugenio Suarez. He is pretty cheap. 3,000 on FanDuel is more expensive relatively. 18 home runs, a 184 ISO. Had a nice power surge through July and the first half of August. Comes and goes. He's never been the model of consistency, but there's a ton of right-handed power in that bat. Take a few pokes at the Green Monster and see what happens with Eugenio Suarez. Luis Guillorme and Geraldo Perdomo at the bottom of the lineup. Just kind of mix and match caliber. Perdomo is the guy you want between the two if you're going to wrap around. 343 on base this year, a 103 WRC plus. Just 2 homers and 5 steals. For the Red Sox, you've got the killer quartet of lefties at the top of the lineup, plus Masataka Yoshida in the 6th spot, separated by a Tyler O'Neill, who's a tremendous power bat in the middle. Not a bad 6-man group to start off a lineup targeting Ryan Nelson. As much as I was saying before that I do think there are demonstrable changes in Ryan Nelson and the fact that he's only giving up a 2.29% home run on the season, that does come on a bit more of a fly ball trajectory. This isn't extreme, but it does mean the ball's in the air pretty frequently. 40+% hard hits, so we're over the line there. We're over the line there. So as much as I think he might have the opportunity to succeed, he is probably targetable with some pretty good Red Sox bats. You can see 3 guys above the magic number for home run upside. That said, in this stretch of good starts, he's given up 3 home runs. He's given up 3 home runs since the start of July. Again, it's a good run out of Ryan Nelson. Jarren Duran up top at 59.37, slashing 293, 352, 513, 221 ISO, 17 homers, 32 steals. Just having a tremendous year. Hits the ball very hard, barrels it pretty frequently. Not bad for strikeouts, 22.1%, 7.9%. Both as walks, both right around the average. Willie Abreu hits the ball very hard, harder than Jarren Duran does on the average. 12.3% barrels and 49.3% hard hits for him. He walks a little bit more than Duran does, but he strikes out more. 265, 333, 500 for him with a 235 ISO. He's hit 14 home runs in 342 plate appearances. 235 ISO and a 126 WRC plus. Absolutely plan on having Willie Abreu in your lineup at those prices. He makes a lot work if you're stacking up Red Sox today, and it's not a bad spot to be stacking. You get a very cheap Tristan Casas. 4,800 on DraftKings is more expensive than he is on FanDuel, but that's still affordable for his quality. 7 home runs in his 117 plate appearances, most of which came earlier in the season before the injury. Had a 238 ISO, 137 WRC plus. He's a very good left-handed power bat. 10.6% barrels, 42.4% hard hits. Again, most of which came earlier in the season. On FanDuel, he's a $2,700 first baseman. That's a crazy good spot. 10.22 in the home run model. Rafi Devers, 58, 4,000. Fully priced, or arguably 200 cheap. You can make him 6,042 across sites. I wouldn't have a problem with it against this pitcher. But the price matters a lot less when you've got all these cheap bats around him. You know, Yoshida, Casas, and Abreu are 3 very high-quality left-handed bats for very good pricing in this stack. Yeah, Duran's expensive. O'Neill, not completely cheap. On FanDuel, he's pretty cheap. But it makes it a lot easier to reach these star prices. Devers has 14.3% barrels and 53.7% hard hits over his 498 plate appearances this year, a 284 ISO, 152 WRC plus with 27 homers. Tyler O'Neill, 22 homers, having a very good year, just needs to stay healthy, needs to stop taking these weird injuries that he takes. Running into outfielders and getting concussed and somehow getting your leg infected and all kinds of weird shit. But when he's in the lineup, he's tremendous. 262 ISO, 136 WRC plus, and all this premium contact. Righty bat, but I don't really mind, especially when you can take pokes at the monster. Not a bad opportunity for Tyler O'Neill. Yoshida, 45-29, has 9 home runs, slashing 297, 372, 442. Very good table setter. Good way to get the lineup restarted for the bottom 3 hitters. And those guys at the bottom are not bad. This is a deep 9-man lineup today. 8 home runs on the year for Danny Jansen. He's probably the least appealing out of that bottom group, but he's a very affordable catcher at just 33 where you got to play him, 27 where you don't. 8 home runs and 32 stolen bases over just 300 plate appearances for David Hamilton, despite getting on only at a 310 clip. He's created runs 3% worse than average, but there's a lot of individual counting stat upside there. He's cheap in the middle infield spots on FanDuel at $2,900. He's absurdly expensive at $4,800 on DraftKings. That's another price I do not really understand how they arrived at. Yeah. Why is David Hamilton 4,800 and Willie Abreu is 4,300? One of them's hitting 8th, and it's not it's not the cheaper one. That's just dumb. How do they not compare these prices? 42 more plate appearances. Abreu's hit 6 more home runs. Hamilton's stolen more bases. Abreu's getting on better. He's got a 126 WRC plus to Hamilton's 97. Slashing 265, 333, 500 versus 255, 310, 410. 235 ISO versus a 155 ISO. But sure, let's take Willie Abreu hitting second and make him 500 cheaper. Ceddanne Rafaela, 38, 29, 13 homers, 17 steals. A very good mix and match caliber wraparound option. He fills 4 positions on FanDuel, 2 on DraftKings. Out of every spot, I'd like him most frequently at the second base spot on FanDuel and then probably third base on FanDuel. Shortstop and outfield, he's a little bit less appealing by comparison to a lot of other options on the board. The 295 on base is probably the difference between him being a positive or a negative run creator. Needs to get on base more frequently and then he can exploit his skill set. But I mean, across the board, those are good counting stats from such a cheap player who's basically in the lineup every single day. Red Sox bats, Diamondbacks bats. Ryan Nelson, Brian Bale. Yeah, I said it. I like putting up the straw man in the chat, challenging these things that I say. Yeah, that's right, straw man. I think Ryan Nelson's better. Come at me. 4:44 on the clock. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe as we get into this Rangers versus Guardians game. Make sure you're checking out our guys over at acemind.io for all your sim and optimization needs. Promo code rotoscouts, all in caps, gets you 20% off your first month over there. Pretty sure that's still working. Got to catch up with those guys. Texas at the top of the board here against the Guardians. Good matchup in terms of just the baseball of it. 2 pretty good lineups. Man for man, you know, with the up and down nature of the performance from the Rangers this year, maybe it seems like they're not as good as they actually are. But in a man for man sense, that's a very, very good lineup, and it's not dissimilar from the one that won the World Series. The Guardians have just been pretty good throughout the season, and as we know, they're very, very low strikeout. It's a challenging spot for Nathan Eovaldi. 3.76 ERA with a 3.33 xFIP, not really walking anybody at 5.6%. He's been good at inducing swinging strikes at 13.3% swinging. Not a bad CSW. 23.9% strikeout rate is all right. Doesn't really align with that very good 13.3% swinging. He's given up a little bit of premium contact on hard hits, but he's kept the ball down mostly, so it hasn't really been too damaging. 3.50% home runs could probably be a little bit lower given the low barrel, low launch. Maybe a little bit of bad luck and happenstance. That's backed up by the xFIP being lower than the ERA and a very, very strong xFIP. He is a good pitcher, but challenging matchup. This team just puts the ball in play so frequently. They're very good at station-to-station baseball. They're pretty good at getting on base regularly, and they just don't strike out that much. All of the key hitters in this lineup are extreme low strikeout guys. And then you get a couple upticks like Daniel Schneemann hitting second today at 30.1% over 166 chances. Little bit in the back end. But most of these hitters are excellent at avoiding strikeouts. Bybee, I think, is just threatened a little bit by the upside, the power. If the Rangers come together, and Voltron their way into their full form, you don't get the Voltron missing a leg and with his head on backward, then I think you're at least a little bit threatened if you're Tanner Bybee here. He's got a 3.33 ERA with a 3.60 xFIP, but he's like dead at league average by stuff plus. 11.9% swinging strikes is good, but that CSW is a little bit low for that. That said, he's come away with 26.9% strikeouts for the season, walking just 6%. Hasn't been bad. He is a good, talented young pitcher. I don't want to take anything away from him, but on a deep, deep slate, when he checks in at 92,900, it feels a little bit like the Hunter Brown spot. I think between the two, I'd rather target Texas than Baltimore, but it's close. 2 pretty similar young pitchers in similarly challenging spots. I think it's mostly just the price that's making me a little bit skeptical. Again, if it was in even the mid eights, the high eights, I'd be more intrigued. Wouldn't totally surprise me if he had a good day, though. Vegas definitely sees it. 3.33 implied total for Texas, 3.75 implied total for Cleveland. So both these teams, as far as Vegas is concerned, pretty heavily favored in the pitching direction. What are we looking at? I just wanted to make sure we didn't have a weather concern here. This wind is blowing in, but just at 5 miles an hour, so it's completely irrelevant. By the way, no weather concerns across the entire slate. But yeah, it's not a win thing. It's just healthy respect for both these pitchers from Vegas today. They project out just fine. If you want to spend that money on those projections, there's no issue with it. They both come with a little bit of ceiling, but they both come with an asterisk for a little bit of danger as well. It's a very much a four corners game for me, but that's again just kind of having that respect for the talent in the Rangers lineup. If we look at Vegas, it's not. It's again, those are low totals. So it depends on how you want to read that. For me, it reads a little bit more of a you can take some shots, and these teams are probably going to be low owned for good talent levels. But I guess we got to lean pitching a little. Marcus Semien, Corey Seager, Josh Smith, and Adolis Garcia off the top of the Rangers lineup. You get some nice bargains in there. It's based somewhat on underperformance this season, of course. Adolis Garcia had 21 home runs and 11 stolen bases, but just a 93 WRC+, plus, just a very limited 179 ISO. That comes on excellent contact, so the results don't really square with the contact, with the way that the bat is striking the ball. 506 plate appearances. He could easily have a big last 6 weeks of the season. And 4,200 is very, very cheap for his ceiling. 3,200, very reasonable on FanDuel. Semien at 48.32, priced down a little bit more probably on the FanDuel slate. It's close. Second base, ideal position to take a upside play like Marcus Semien. He's at 18 home runs, a 160 ISO is bad, a 102 WRC+, plus, 2 points above average. It's not the great season that we've grown accustomed to from Marcus Semien, but as we've talked about all year, none of that is off the mark. So could come roaring back for 6 more weeks. Seager at 5,400, 3,700, getting cheaper on DraftKings. 28 home runs, 229 ISO, 134 WRC+. Plus. Not a bad option positionally, and top priority bat in this lineup if you're stacking this team. Josh Smith, down to 355 in terms of the on base, at 121 WRC+, plus is still holding up pretty nicely. 12 home runs, 8 stolen bases. He's never been great for counting stat upside, but a capable enough hitter in terms of putting the ball in play, and he's demonstrated the ability to consistently reach first base, despite of a bit of a decline from the elite start. He's been good at staying involved and being a part of correlated scoring for this team. Nathaniel Lowe, 36-29, 10 home runs on the year, a 106 WRC+. Plus. Mix and match quality, hasn't really shown the power upside this year. Does have a little bit of lefty pop in the bat, definitely the ability to draw a walk and get involved. 345 on base is the most appealing part of his line this season. He's just cheap at first base with some ability, but he's been a little bit more deprioritized. Josh Young, 39, 3,000, 98 pretty good plate appearances, 4 home runs, a 181 ISO, missed most of the season, but a very capable right-handed bat at the position. Wyatt Langford for 38-28. Has ability, but a mediocre rookie year. 416 plate appearances, 7 home runs, 12 steals, a 123 ISO, 91 WRC+. Plus. This is a kid that was the very top end of the prospect list. Kid that a lot of people expected to compete for the Rookie of the Year, and really not doing so. But there is talent there, and he's very cheap. Jonah Heim for 32-27 can hit you a home run from the catcher spot every now and again. He's got 11 on the year, but just a 115 ISO. Mediocre contact numbers. And then Leonid Taveras, mix and match caliber player from the bottom as a wraparound. 9 homers, 14 steals, but an inconsistent on base and a below average 79 WRC+. Plus. The Guardians have their 2 elite power bats, plus their elite table setter in the lineup today. That said, it doesn't feel like who's missing? No big Christmas in terms of the power upside. Jonaneski Noel. Somebody else is not in the lineup that I'm not putting my finger on. But regardless, you get Stephen Kwan off the top 310, 371, 457 this year. Creating runs 37% better than average. Just needs to get himself to first base, which he does at a very strong 371 clip, and be sitting there when Ramirez and Naylor come up. Daniel Schneemann hitting second is a mix and match quality player at best. 4 home runs and 2 steals, a 168 ISO, 96 WRC plus. It's just very cheap. Shortstop and outfield not ideal on DraftKings, but you can plug him in for a discounted option in either one of those spots and be okay. Second base, third base on FanDuel for $2,400. You're a little bit better off at the second base spot at least. You're not going to block third base from Jose Ramirez, obviously. 63-38 for Ramirez, 32 home runs, 30 stolen bases, a 257 ISO, 136 WRC plus. Just remains a superstar player and putting up another very, very strong season that looks a lot like his previous years. Josh Naylor up to 27 home runs, a 227 ISO, 118 WRC plus. Not a bad option for some lefty power. Just cost $4,400 on DraftKings. 33 on FanDuel is more correct. I can understand why DraftKings would have him a little bit cheaper, but 44 seems like they've exaggerated it a little bit too much. That feels like it should be more in the 48 to 5,000 range, trending toward 5,000. But I would accept 48. 44 feels an extra little bit too low. Will Brennan is a mix and match outfielder, 8 home runs, a 91 WRC plus. Gets kind of thin down lineup for the Guardians. Supports some upside for Eovaldi. Andres Jimenez is non-threatening, a 92 WRC plus for him over 80 WRC plus. 5 home runs, 22 steals, just a 301 on base. And then Lane Thomas at that 92 WRC plus, 8 home runs, 29 steals out of him. These are two guys who are talented. Lane Thomas probably has shown us more at the major league level overall. But they're two not incapable players. They're just not having great years. If you're going to the Guardians, you could do worse than including probably 1, not 2 of those guys. But they're also very skippable, especially if you're short stacking the Guardians. You take 3, you're just going Kwan, Ramirez, Naylor. But these guys are more on the board for me than Bo Naylor, Brian Rocchio. Probably a little bit more appealing. I'd rather have Lane Thomas, I think, than Will Brennan. Naylor's just really inconsistent. 9 home runs, but just a 262 on base, just a 148 ISO, so even the power is not regular. 71 WRC plus, 6 homers and 9 steals out of Brian Rocchio, 77 WRC plus, not much of a bat. I'm going to put the pitchers on top because that's what Vegas is saying. We'll go Tanner Bybee above Nathan Eovaldi. Although the projections have it the other way around slightly. I will lean Vegas, though, and I'll take the additional strikeout upside that the Rangers lineup affords to higher strikeout pitchers. So we'll go Bybee, Eovaldi, and then for me, Rangers, Guardians. But the bats are definitely lessened than they might normally be. Nationals, Mackenzie Gore, a topic of conversation earlier in the day in the Discord. Going to be interesting. Don't love where he's projected, like I was saying at the top of the show. He's extremely cheap, and he lands all the way up there. But when you look deeper into it, and you start considering, like, who are all these guys down here, it isn't all that crazy that Mackenzie Gore, an established Major League talent, has a decent projection today against the Braves lineup that this projected version anyway, 23.9%. Probably do have the confirmed by now. Yes, we do. It's probably not going to be all that different. Nationals. 23% for the confirmed version. There are Ks available for him. He's got a 23.8% strikeout rate over 25 starts, 125 and 2/3 innings this year, but a 4.66 ERA. But with that comes a 4.06 xFIP. Means the 4.66 ERA is probably a little bit of bad luck and happenstance. He's walking too many hitters. That's probably a part of the problem with the ERA. 9.5% walk rate. Just a 1.93% home run rate on the season, though, is very good at keeping the ball in the yard. 12.2% swinging strikes is very good. 25.5% CSWs is where the walks come from. 81-74. Against this Braves team, as we've talked about, I need him to take the home runs away like he's been doing very effectively throughout the season. And then I think there's very clear-cut strikeout potential. He gave up in 2 of his last 5 games. He has given up 2 home runs in 2 of them. like 2 home runs apiece, 4 home runs total, but no home runs in the other 3. 5 2/3 against the Phillies in his most recent start. Gave up 5 earned on 9 hits. 6 strikeouts, though. 4 innings against the Angels. Gave up 5 runs, but none of them earned. Struck out just 2 and walked 6. Very problematic kind of a start. You don't want that time. 5 innings against the Giants. He gave up 4 earned runs on 8 hits. Struck out 6. 2 home runs allowed in that one. 3 runs on 8 hits. No homer. Just 1 strikeout over 5 1/3 against Arizona. Weird start. And then 5 innings against St. Louis, gave up the 2 home runs, 3 strikeouts, 6 earned on 9 hits. He has not been good. It's been since basically, like, all of those were pretty mediocre starts at best. And he hasn't had a good one since June? Yeah, July. July 1st. 5 2/3 against the Mets. 1 run, 5 hits, 8 strikeouts. Would have liked to have gotten the additional. I think I actually rostered him that day. Would have liked to have gotten the additional hitter for the quality start. If we're looking back in time, Gore last year, 4.42 ERA, 4.11 xFIP, 12.1% swinging. Very similar looking numbers. 25.9% strikeouts was a little bit better. It was still high walk. Was allowing more premium contact, more home runs, more power last year. Year before, kind of split the difference in terms of the power output, despite, again, significant premium contact. So he's really lessened the premium contact. He's lessened the barrels. He's cut the home runs significantly. Some of that probably happenstance, but Stuff Plus really likes the arsenal. We're 11 points above average by Stuff Plus. Mackenzie Gore is not untalented for your money. At 7,400, there's a distinct possibility he's going to be in my lineup on FanDuel, and then I'll be upset about that later in the evening. 8,100 on DraftKings, I think he's in the mix for shares, but I totally get it if you just want to leave him on the board. Chris Sale, on the other hand, 11-1, 11-5, going up against a very low strikeout Nationals team. You can see 16.4% strikeout rate for this confirmed version of the lineup. That does have numerous low, small sample players who are at low strikeout rates, but even the other guys, I mean, only James Wood is above even 20%. He's all the way up at 29.5. Everybody else significantly below 19.8% for Jacob Young is the closest to 20 even that we get. And everybody else significantly below that. So it's a low strikeout squad, but Chris Sale, fortunately, 33.6% strikeouts, 14.5% swinging, 33.5% CSW. Those are the best numbers we're going to see for strike throwing and strikeouts across this entire slate. He's Chris Sale. Significant upside abounds for Chris Sale, even against the low strikeout Nationals team. 2.62 ERA with a 2.46 xFIP on the season, a 1.44% home run rate on extreme weak and medium contact, 5.1% barrels. He is absolutely elite. If you can figure out a way to pay for him, I encourage you to do so. I would not roster the Nationals against Chris Sale. Even I don't think it's a position that you need to go out there and hedge, and even as a contrarian, they're cheap, etc., etc. It doesn't seem like a good spot to me today. It's just for the most extreme contrarian approaches on the board, and even if they do succeed, what are the odds that they're really going to light Chris Sale up, really going to light the bullpen up after that? Chris Sale has had 1 bad start all season. Came against Oakland, a comparably bad team, I will say that. 8 runs on 9 hits, struck out just 4, allowed 2 home runs in that game. He gave up 5 earned runs over 7 to Miami. Maybe he is bad against bad teams. That was all the way back on April 13th, his 3rd outing of the year. He gave up a home run, 5 earned on 6 hits, struck out 7. Outside of those 2 games, he has not given up more than 3 earned runs, and he only gave up 3 earned runs once. It came against Texas on April 19th. Went 7 innings, 3 earned runs, 5 hits, 7 strikeouts. Every other game this season has been 2 earned runs or fewer. That's how you landed a 2.62 ERA and a 2.46 xFIP. Alex Call from the top does hit lefties pretty well, but there are lefties and there are lefties, and Chris Sale is the extreme good side of that. 3,500, 3,000 seems overpriced. That said, it is a good 112 plate appearances, 3 home runs, 5 steals, a 184 ISO, 171 WRC+. You can't ignore that, but know what you're buying if you're considering going there. 51-34 for James Wood, who's up to 5 home runs and 7 steals, a 169 ISO, 137 WRC plus, over 190 plate appearances. Putting together a pretty solid half of a rookie season. Not bad at all for one of the top prospects in baseball. 12.7% barrels and 55.5% hard hits is absolutely elite. The strikeouts are problematic, but he's looking like a 3 true outcomes guy with maybe a little bit more juice than that, given how high that average is. So the strikeouts have not been a problem for him whatsoever. Juan Yepez, up to 4 home runs and 167 plate appearances, 159 ISO, 113 WRC plus. Low strikeout, puts decent bat on ball, mix and match quality at first base for 36-29. But again, we're facing Chris Sale today. Keibert Ruiz, part of that low strikeout equation, 10.1% strikeouts this year, 10.3% last year. Doesn't really walk, so it puts a lot of balls in play. He just doesn't really hit them all that hard. 12 home runs this year. He had 17 or 18 last year. He's okay, but again, Chris Sale, not the spot you really want to draw that share. Against a different Braves pitcher over the weekend maybe, or against a different pitcher sometime next week. Cheap Keibert Ruiz, if you find him hitting cleanup, is not the worst play in the world, just given all the frequency of balls in play. The results come and go, but in this spot, doesn't seem appealing. Andres Chaparro, I have a problem with that name for some reason. Chaparro. 2,500, 2,600, 276, 344, 414, a 114 WRC plus, over 32 chances. Mix and match player for a very cheap price, but Chris Sale's on the mound. Ildemaro Vargas, 2,400, 2,200, 4 positions on FanDuel. Hits lefties fairly well, but again, Chris Sale. Jose Tena, same thing. Jacob Young, just steals bases, doesn't really get on consistently enough. 308 on base has gone up a little bit, but a 79 WRC plus, 29 steals, but just 2 home runs, mediocre slash line. He's all right, but entirely skippable in this situation. And then Nasim Nunez at the bottom of the lineup. Dead min price on both sites. 28 decent plate appearances so far, but I'll remind you one last time, Chris Sale's on the mound. If you're looking at the Braves, which given Mackenzie Gore's mediocrity throughout at least this recent stretch, probably worth considering. They're very diminished. They are pretty high strikeout, but they do still have some dangerous bats, especially for a lefty like Jorge Soler, Marcell Ozuna. Matt Olson, lefty is not bad, but it really does thin out. You're talking about a lineup that has Ramon Laureano, Whit Merrifield, Gio Urshela, Orlando Arcia in it. It's definitely not the Braves that we've seen over the last few years. Mikey Harris from the top spot, 42, 3,000. You are buying a lot of cheap counting stat talent, despite the results this year over 315 plate appearances. He's a better player than that, at least for home run and stolen base upside, and a little bit more consistency in the slash line. Those are good prices for Michael Harris. Jorge Soler at 48-31. You're buying a tremendous amount of power upside, again, kind of in spite of the results this year. He's up to 16 home runs and a 194 ISO, but we've seen him crest to much, much higher peaks than that. 11.4% barrels is good in a vacuum, but it's down from 15 last year. 41.4%, same thing, down from 48 last year. Significant upside for home runs, but Mackenzie Gore's been pretty good at limiting home run power this year. Ozuna at 12.96 in the home run model, has 37 on the year, 283 ISO. Pretty significant power bat there. Olson, the numbers look good in a vacuum. 11.8% barrels, 46.5% hard hits, 21 homers in 535 plate appearances, a 191 ISO. Just take the name off the jersey, consider the numbers for the pricing, and you're not that bad. We just expect more from Matt Olson, I think. Ramon Laureano, 13% barrels and 42.6% hard hits is going to continue to be the focus. He's very high strikeout, but when he makes contact, he actually does hit the ball very hard. 7 home runs in 190 plate appearances, 174 ISO. He's not good. Once upon a time, he was okay for counting stats. I think now we're just going to get some power with the odd stolen base from him, but he's not going to get on consistently enough. He's just a mix and match cheap option in the outfield hitting fifth. Merrifield's been on a tear since joining this team. 4 home runs and 16 steals on the season, just an 82 WRC plus on the season, but has definitely been better over the last month or so. 34-25, you can consider him at second base. Sean Murphy is a very good catcher who is having a rough year in his 194 plate appearances. Was much better for power last year, was much better for contact last year. Still has a lot of ability and is now just cheap. So 37 for Sean Murphy on DK, 26 on FanDuel, honestly. I have no issue putting him and Murphy into a Brave stack. Gio Urshela and Orlando Arcia at the bottom of the lineup are entirely skippable. Arcia is up to 12 home runs, but just a 128 ISO, a 71 WRC plus, and Urshela has never really been a good hitter. It's a short Braves lineup, I don't know. I think I'm going to buy into the Mackenzie Gore problem. It's going to burn me so bad. Again, I have no faith in these projections. I have faith in the projections overall, but occasionally we get one like this where I am challenged to believe that. Let's not say no faith. We'll say I'm challenged to buy into these, but at the very low price, I might just go try and find out. That said, you do have that good price, that good price. It's a lot to work with on a slate like this. So that's why I say you can take it or leave it. I mean, if you don't buy in, totally fine with that. You've got justification for not buying in. You've got a lot of other options to go to. Chris Sale way up top, followed by, for me, Mackenzie Gore, followed by the Braves bats. The Nationals bats are really not on the table. I'm sitting here looking at this like, oh, we're making good time. We've got most of these out of the way, and oh nope, there's another couple games hiding down there. Taiwan, Michael Walker. Taiwan making what did I say? His third start back? Yeah, third start back. He pitched on the 13th and on the 18th. Did not complete the 5th inning. 3 earned runs in both starts. Struck out 5 against the Marlins. Struck out 3 against the Nationals. 3 walks in both games. Gave up a home run to the Marlins and 2 home runs to the Nationals. And overall was just not that good. 19% strikeouts against 10% walks this year. Pretty problematic. Significant power output allowed this year. 5.58% home runs. Nearly 92 miles an hour of exit velo. Nearly 50% hard hits. 14+% barrels. It's been a bad year for Taiwan. 5.69 ERA, a 4.89 xFIP. Not really striking anybody out. Not inducing any swinging strikes whatsoever. So we're just pitching a contact. Against the KC team that has been very good all season and is pulling a significant run total at 4.88. Honestly, I believe that is probably the correct number. Juice it up to another half a run for the game. No reason to think the Royals wouldn't be able to succeed against Taiwan. Waka on the other side has a 3.33 ERA, but a 4.14 xFIP, a 20.7% strikeout rate is nothing overly appealing, just 9.7% swinging, 26.1% CSW. He's been all right. He's been very good at limiting premium contact, 31.9% hard hits and 87.1 miles an hour of exit velo. He's been inducing weak and medium all season long. It's part of what has made his numbers sparkle a little bit. But I think you can see the creases, see the seams. A 4.14 xFIP is not all that good. The strikeout rate is not all that good. He's facing a very, very good Phillies team with a ton of power in the lineup. Don't really like the spot for Waka despite how well he's been pitching and what are not unfair prices. Just doesn't look like a great day. We do have both of these lineups. Let me grab them. Cheap Austin Hayes looks like he snuck into the bottom of the fills again. So top of the Phillies looks like normal with the 3 superstars up there, or 2 superstars and Kyle Schwarber, who's a tremendous power hitter, I guess is probably the right way to put that. Love Schwarber, he's very good, but superstar's probably stretching it a little bit. By the way, speaking of very good players, and in this case, future Hall of Famers, Joey Votto. Hat tip to Mr. Votto for the career. Retired this week. Some tear-jerking kind of comments in his retirement statement about just, I really wanted to try and play for Toronto, but I'm just not good anymore. Only ever was a Red. But just, if you've never seen interviews or anything with Joey Votto, do yourself a favor, and they're all over Twitter right now. Pull up a couple of the clips of interviews. Just a good guy, really, really smart ball player, and just smart, well-spoken dude for a ball player is what I mean by that. Is smart ball player as well as far as what he does on the field, but I mean a smart guy, and it really, really comes across in his interviews and everything. He's just a really caring dude, done a lot of good things for the community, really good dude of a ball player. So, again, hat tip to Joey Votto. He'll be missed. Was hoping he'd get back to the show this year and have one nice last little send-off. So Schwarb's up at the top for 56-39, 28 home runs on the season, a 224 ISO. Creating runs 36% better than average, 13.3% barrels and 54.4% hard hits. Sometimes you can just grab bats like that and expect that they're going to generate their own exit velocity and hard hit against a pitcher like this. But it is a combination where Waka's ability to induce weak and median is going to have an impact here. 14.65 in the home run model, though, 12.85. These guys tend to win out with all of their power. Trey Turner, 8.80. You can see a little bit more victimized by the lack of home run output against Waka this year. Harper at 12.85 in the model bounces right back. He's got 26 on the year, 247 ISO, a 140 WRC plus, and then Turner in the middle, slashing 302, 345, 471, creating runs 27% better than average, 14 homers, 14 steals. 3 elite options up top. Alec Bohm back in the lineup today, 4,800, 3,500. That's after a day off yesterday. 13 home runs, elite contact, low strikeout rate, 127 WRC plus on the season. Not a monster power hitter, but a very, very good hitter, good extra base bat, and a good run creator and driver in of his teammates that get on base pretty frequently ahead of him. Castellanos at 42, 33, 16 home runs on the year. You're just kind of buying cheap power with Nick Castellanos at this point. He's not very consistent, 97 WRC plus, just a 302 on base, but does still have a little bit of pop in the bat. Bryson Stott at 38, 28, has 25 steals, a 309 on base, but has been 15 points worse than average creating runs in a very good lineup. I'd like to see a little bit more consistency out of Stott, but he does have good any given slate ability. He is low strikeout, high walk, so it's a problematic option for Michael Wacha. Realmuto, 43, 3,000, still very playable at the catcher spot. Not having a great year for him. 95 WRC plus, a 131 ISO, and 8 home runs and 316 chances. It's a lot better than that, but he is still making very good contact. Continue to think you still roll him out. Brandon Marsh makes similar contact to Realmuto, both 8 plus in barrel rate, both well over 40% hard hits. Marsh is cheap at 32.29. He's got 12 home runs and 14 steals and 363 chances and 99 WRC plus. And then don't sleep on Austin Hayes at the bottom of the lineup. 2,800, 2,500, just 4 home runs in a disappointing season over 214 plate appearances. But this is a player who has hit 20 plus home runs in the show before. So definitely interesting enough for 28, 25 if you're stuck for a cheap option late in the Phillies lineup. Not a bad player to stack. And then the Royals, the more appealing of the two spots. Michael Massey for just 45.29 has 10 home runs, a 196 ISO. Makes okay contact, not like elite levels of contact, but low strikeout, low walk. So that balances out and gives a little bit of a nudge to his offensive upside. For these prices at second base for a lefty against Taijuan Walker, who's yielding all this power this season, sign me up for some Michael Massey. I love that option at second base. That is ideal pricing. 66.45 is not ideal pricing, but it's fair for Bobby Witt Jr. in the season he's having. 14.5% barrels, nearly 50% hard hits. 25 homers, 25 steals, a 267 ISO, 177 WRC plus. Vinny Pasquantino, 5,000, 3,400. You guys know I love this hitter. 187 ISO, 109 WRC plus. 18 home runs, 265, 321, 452. Been on an absolute tear since like the All-Star break. Hits the ball very hard, does not strike out, 12.7% strikeouts, 46.1% hard hits. We have been banging the drum for Vinny Pasquantino all season long, and he's delivered for us. He really has. I'm happy with the season so far. I continue to think there's even more upside to come. Sal Perez, 5,200, 3,000 across sites. Catcher and first base eligible on both. More handy on DK than it is on FanDuel, but you've obviously got Vinny there, so more often than not, you just stick him at catcher anyway. 22 homers for Sal this season, a 191 ISO, 115 WRC plus, continuing to be a very good offensive catcher. MJ Melendez for 35.28 has 15 home runs from the left side, a 206 ISO, another really intriguing bat to throw at Taijuan Walker from the left side of the plate. 8.8% barrels, 43.5% hard hits. Even the strikeouts this year, 24.6%. That's not problematic. 28.2 last year was a lot higher, but it came against 10.3% walks. He's lost a little bit for walks this year. Would be having a better season overall if he was drawing more walks. Doesn't really hit for average, not consistent. It's tough to even say that he's good. But the way that he hits the ball, the power is very real. 206 ISO, 15 home runs, and all that quality contact is all I want for that cheap of a price. So MJ's firmly on the board for me. I kind of prefer it to Hunter Renfroe, honestly. Renfroe's got 11 home runs, a lower strikeout rate, maybe a little bit more consistency given the 307 on base, but I think MJ's probably got the higher ceiling. 93 WRC plus versus 83, fine, Renfroe wins there as well, but those are both below average numbers. 206 ISO versus 155 ISO. In a spot where I'm saying I'm just buying power, I'll default to the better ISO and the better contact. But Renfroe is on the board for those prices. If you're stacking up Royals, especially if you're building more than one stack, Hunter Renfroe should probably be in one of them. Adam Frazier, 2,800, 2,400, mix and match quality at the absolute best. 69 WRC plus in 246 chances. Paul DeJong gives you a little bit more than that as far as ceiling goes. He does have 21 home runs and a 208 ISO this year, again, against a pitcher who's given up a tremendous amount of premium contact and power. So DeJong's on the board, but not exactly consistent. 31% strikeouts. Gives you a lot of zeros in with the infrequent spikes for quality. Kyle Isbell, mix and match from the left side, 3,000, 2,600. Royals bats, Phillies bats. If you need a pitcher, it's Michael Wacha, but I really don't need a pitcher from this game. Yeah, Vegas kind of backing that up. That's a low total for the Phillies. I really do think this one should be there. Get the Phillies to 4.5, get the Royals over 5. I don't know if it's gone up since the show started. I guess I could check. Nope, still just 9. 128, 139. So yeah, it's basically exactly the same as it's been all day. I think that's a little bit more of an opportunity for offense than it might be showing there. Anyway, 6 games to go. Basically a full show to go. David Festa is interesting, at least. Andre Palante a lot less so. 4.07 ERA, but a 3.91 xFIP for Palante. That's okay. You know, the run numbers are all right. The premium contact and power is downright good. Stuff Plus doesn't really like the arsenal. Not really a strikeout pitcher. Allows too many walks. Doesn't induce any swinging strikes or have a good CSW. But definitely has been missing barrels, inducing weak and medium contact somewhat effectively, and missing home runs on a 0.2 degree average launch angle. So if we're just looking for a guy who keeps the ball on the ground, you can see the impact it's having on the usually robust Twins home run numbers. Even Royce Lewis at just 8.42, Matt Wallner at 4.79, Jeffers at 4.69. So definitely having a noteworthy impact on their power, but overall not really appealing for our DFS upside, our pursuit of scoring a bunch of fantasy points here. 7,372. He doesn't have to have a killer day at those prices. But I don't know that he gives you anything more than these medians, and that's probably not enough even at these prices in an SP2. If you play him, it's here, but he's probably, you know, a lower end option than a lot of other similarly priced or cheaper pitchers. Festa, on the other hand, 7,100, 7,300 across sites. Over his 32 2/3 has a 27.7% strikeout rate. That's very appealing against a Cards team that isn't overly high strikeout, but does have a few decent strikeout targets in it, and some of them are some of their better as a stretch when we're talking about Goldie, Matt Carpenter, but you know, some targetable hitters down there. Actually, no Carpenter's in, no Pham. We get Victor Scott, as somebody pointed out like an hour ago in the chat at this point. Cards lineup's in, and the Twins lineup is in. Twins lineup's there already. So 20.7% strikeout rate for the confirmed version of the Cards lineup, but Contreras 27%, Goldie 27%, Carpenter for whatever he is 30%. Yeah, Arenado just 13.5%, but as we've talked about, kind of a diminished version of Nolan Arenado, despite the walk-off grand slam the other day. But he is low strikeout still. Brendan Donovan, not overly threatening. Alec Burleson having a good year, low strikeout, maybe a little bit of a threat there. But I see some upside for Festa. He's had some issues with home runs, no doubt about it. 4.96% home run rate in his 6 starts. 10.9% barrels, 39.1% hard hits, 88.6 miles an hour of exit velo. That's accounted for. You can see some pretty significant home run marks for the Cards. They were top 2 or 3 on the home run board overall today as a team. So definitely some appeal on the Cardinal side of the equation. But I do think Festa's good enough to get through this team, find some decent strikeout totals. Last time out, 5 innings, 2 earned runs allowed on 6 hits to Texas at Texas, struck out 6. Just 3 1/3 the start before that. Struck out 3, but walked 3, gave up a home run. 1 run on 3 hits to Cleveland. Not sure what happened in that game. Did that get rain? Has not completed the 6th inning yet. That's where some of the concern comes in on FanDuel, even at the good $7,300 price. Even when he's pitched well, they've limited him to 5 innings. He's completed 5 different times in his 6 starts. 6 starts, 1 bulk relief appearance. That's right. 4 1/3 innings in bulk relief. With some healthy strikeout totals. So if you think you could get through without the quality start on FanDuel, that puts him more firmly on the board. But I think you're going to need it today with such a deep pitching slate. DraftKings, I like it a lot better at 71 because I only need the win. I only need the 5. Not a bad spot for them to pick off a win bonus with their team going up against Palante today and with his talent on the mound. So like it better over here. He's only loosely playable with probably 5 innings here. I think you could throw some cards, bats at Festa, and if you roster them on either side, I think you definitely should probably hedge with a little bit of cards, especially with all that power that they're showing. Burleson at 16.38 in the home run model, Wilson Contreras at 17.16, Goldie down lineup at 12.16, Arenado at 9.9, and a couple other 8+ guys through the lineup. Not the best power hitting team in the league, but definitely some pop available. 21 homers on the season for Burleson in 463 chances. Even Mason Winoff, the top, has 11 in 489. I continue to think that he's more of a just good real-life shortstop than a high-quality DFS option. But he's not a low-quality DFS option. He's a good correlated scorer. He's low strikeout. Puts the ball in play fairly regularly. Contreras is a high-end catcher, 5,000, 3,200. He's at 15 home runs, has a 207 ISO. He's created runs at a team-leading 39% better than average. Strikes the ball very effectively. Great barrel rate, great hard hit rate. Donovan just fills multiple positions for cheap pricing, 38-28 across sites, 266, 331, 387. The OPS is what I was chasing with him earlier in the season, 717. He was a little bit higher than that earlier in the year. 104 WRC+. He's an effective utility man type of a bat, but just miscast in the cleanup role. Low strikeout, low walk, so there are balls in play available. Arenado for 3,000 on FanDuel at third base, 4,100 on DraftKings, is very cheap. 41 especially on the DraftKings slate. If you have any memory of the hitter he once was, that pops out to you immediately. He's not having a good season, but he's not been completely lost. He's not Brendan Drury, Anthony Rendon type level. 271, 325, 405. He's created runs 6% better than average. 14 home runs and 502 plate appearances for him is disappointing. If you just took a vacuum, if you gave that to Lars Nootbaar, that would be kind of disappointing for Lars as well. I don't know. It's disappointing output for Nolan Arenado, but it's okay. It's an okay home run total. The biggest concerns come in the contact numbers, the 3.5% barrels, the 30.1% hard hits, the 133 ISO as a result. He's gotten to the point where it's just, he is low strikeout, he can put the ball in play, he can hit an occasional home run, but he's nowhere near the star he used to be. But he's not priced like it either, so it does make him playable in the 5 spot in that lineup. Lars Nootbaar is hitting the ball extremely hard, 50.5% hard hits, 10.1% barrels, only costs 33.27 across sites, has 8 home runs and 5 steals in a limited 281 plate appearances, just 101 WRC+, just a 148 ISO. I don't think that those results line up well with that contact, so I'm more a believer in the skill set. The contact, I think he's cheap, I think he's good. 8.92 in the home run model, he can work his way into some lineups if you're stacking up cards. Goldie at 43-31 does have 19 home runs, does have good contact numbers on the season. 9.4% barrels, 47.2% hard hits. Both those numbers are down, but they're still good. The problem for him comes in the average, the on base, the results-oriented stuff, the 159 ISO, the 89 WRC+. Inconsistent at best, but still does have the ability to drive the ball over the wall. Matt Carpenter, 2,500 across sites, very limited option, over 133 plate appearances, 4 home runs on the season, a 108 WRC+, but I don't think he's even that good. And then Victor Scott just has not been good in the show at all, but has all the speed in the world. If he manages to work his way to first base, which he's done at a 180 clip over 111 plate appearances, maybe he steals a base for you, but 13 WRC+ in that small sample, not good. Twins give you some upside. They're good run creators, even against the limited launch angle and the limited power that Andre Palante is providing here. There is the idea that the Twins can come out and score some runs. 4.69 implied total is one of the better marks overall on the slate. So while Palante might not be completely vulnerable to their home run power, he's probably going to be a little bit vulnerable to their ability to sequence, get on base, and create runs. So good spot to stack Twins either way, and they do have power ability, so maybe they find one or two against him. Guys that are priority for that would be Lewis and Wallner, as well as Larnach in the middle of the lineup. But you can get some juice from any of these guys going down the lineup as far as power goes. They can find their own, just got to elevate the ball a little bit. Willie Castro back in the leadoff spot, 45-31, still 4 positions on FanDuel for a fair price. Shortstop only on DraftKings is not ideal, but he's playable there. If you're stacking up Twins, you can put him in that spot. 10 home runs, 12 steals, 337 on base, creating runs 13% better than average. Tidy little season for him, but not a great standout kind of a year. He's been okay. Larnach at 3,400, 2,900 has 12 home runs and 301 chances, a 182 ISO, 116 WRC+. Very, very good contact numbers this year that are down actually from last year. Hard hits are up slightly, barrels are down slightly from 2 years ago. So maybe more power to come than what we've seen from him, and what we've seen has been perfectly acceptable for these cheap prices. Royce Lewis at 56.35 does lead the team at 8.42 in the home run model. He's hit 15 with a 320 ISO in just 196 plate appearances. 14.3% barrels is pretty elite. Definitely a premium power bat in a good spot. One of the top priority bats, if not the top priority bat in this lineup. A cheaper Matt Wallner has a ton of power as well. 8 home runs for him and just 144 chances. Lefty bat with a lot of thunder. 56.5% hard hit so far this year. 48.1 in a smaller sample last year. 53.1 year before. Wallner can definitely square the ball up. Whether he finds consistency in terms of avoiding strikeouts is an entirely different discussion. But the walks support a good on-base percentage. Supports a good WRC plus in his limited sample this year. It's a premium bat for a very, very cheap price in this lineup. Ryan Jeffers at 41.31 has 20 home runs over just 372 plate appearances, has a 239 ISO. If anything, he's an underappreciated catcher. I really feel like we don't hear enough about Ryan Jeffers as a DFS option or just in general. 4,100 at catcher, hitting 5th today for this team. Even if he's not hitting home runs, there's a very good extra base hit opportunity run creator here. 120 WRC plus from the catcher spot, a 239 ISO. That's a killer catcher option for a very, very reasonable price. Carlos Santana, 3,700, 2,900 has 18 home runs. He's very low strikeout at 17.2%. He can draw walks, get involved, 114 WRC plus, 188 ISO, having a good year. Max Kepler not having a good year for Kepler. 135 ISO is disappointing, so are 8 home runs in 378 plate appearances, but he's slightly above average for run creation. Striking out less than he did last year, but walking a lot less, not making nearly as good contact as he has previously. But there's still ability there for those prices. Edward Julian is kind of the same thing. 3,100, 2,600 at second base gives you a little bit of upside just on the position alone. 7 home runs and 6 steals this year, 143 ISO, 98 WRC plus. But we've seen this guy mash, and he's made good contact this year, if nothing else. Last year, he hit 16 homers in 408 plate appearances. Had a very good 263, 381, 459 with a 195 ISO and a 136 WRC plus. I wouldn't discount Edward Julian today. Austin Martin, mix and match caliber player, 255, 325, 353, 96 WRC plus in 204 chances this year. Twins bats, Festa, Cards bats, no Andre Palante for me. Chris Flexen and Cater Montero. Flexen checks in at a 5.28 ERA with a 4.25 xFIP, just 19.7% strike. I'm sorry, that's Montero. I'm reading the wrong side. I was like, wow, that stuff plus rating went up. This is what I was looking for. We'll do Montero since I was just saying it. 19.7% strikeouts, 7.6% walks. A pretty decent little xFIP at 4.25 against that 5.28 ERA, but obviously has had some issues with power with premium contact in the small sample of starts. Flexen is at 5.46 ERA, a 5.37 xFIP, nearly 50 points below average for run creation. God damn it. Tyler O'Neill's status changed to day. What did I say about taking stupid injuries? Didn't we have that lineup? Did he scratch? Yep, Tyler O'Neill scratched. So annoying. Probably stubbed his toe in the clubhouse or something. Yeah, I just saw you guys mention it. That's annoying, man. More so for my dynasty team, but it's annoying for the Red Sox stack as well. So Flexen is just terrible. Don't play him. 15.7% strikeouts, 9.4% walks. He's just kind of a target. And again, I'm going to come back around to these Tigers are not completely uninteresting. There are some talented young lefty bats in this lineup now. Let's see, we got the confirmed. Doesn't look like we got a confirmed Tigers. We do have a confirmed White Sox. So Keaton Montero on his side of things, at just 6,400, 8,000, is going to benefit from facing the White Sox. 24% strikeout rate for this confirmed version of the White Sox lineup. I don't want to totally discount him, especially when he checks in at 6,400 on the DraftKings slate. At 8,000 on FanDuel, I feel like that's a little bit light, or a little bit high price, a little bit light on opportunity. That said, he did go 5 against the Yankees, just 2 hits, no runs in his most recent start. Struck out 5. That's an effective enough outing. Not for 8,000 on FanDuel, but 64 definitely is an SP2 on DraftKings. He had a 6-inning start against Seattle back in the beginning of August on the 6th. Struck out 8 in that one, gave up just 1 earned run on 4 hits. Went 7 in the game before that, gave up 4 runs, but did go 7 innings against the Royals. 6 hits, 3 strikeouts. That was on the back of 3 straight 5-run games. Not good. He's pitched into the 7th 3 times this year, though. I guess he does have a little bit of depth upside as well if things are going right. So I won't take him off the board at 8,000 on FanDuel, but I'm a little bit less inclined to go there than I am a $7,700 Savali against Oakland, a $7,800 Birdsong against Seattle, let alone all the better pitchers. Probably would go to Mackenzie Gore at 74 against Atlanta before I go to Montero at 8,000 against a much, much worse White Sox team. That's probably the closest one, despite the disparity in projections. So let me see if Underdog has the Tigers lineup. This is actually maybe an important one. Does not look like. Jordan Montgomery moving to the bullpen. Ryan Nelson will remain in the rotation. Deserves it. So assuming that this is close enough to the Tigers lineup, you can see a lot of the appealing lefties. They're very, very cheap. Most of them not named brands yet. Most of them might not ever get to that level. But Riley Green is legitimately just a good major league hitter. 261, 353, 483 with a 222 ISO and a 135 WRC plus this year. Checks in at an 8.86 in the home run model from the left side. That comes on 12.9% barrels, 45% hard hits, and we're throwing him against Chris Flexen. Big yes. Big, big yes. Kerry Carpenter makes elite contact. 17.1% barrels, 46.5% hard hits in his 194 plate appearances. 10.2% and 43.1% were pretty good last year. 11.1, 36.1 year before. Not bad. He's got 12 home runs and a 307 ISO in his 194 chances. Big time lefty hitter. Strikes out a fair amount of the time, but that's a lot less problematic against Chris Flexen. Colt Keith, another young lefty hitter with a lot of pop in his bat. 438 mediocre plate appearances this year. 11 home runs, a 128 ISO, and 96 WRC+, 258, 308, 386. I guarantee you that those numbers would be good if all 438 plate appearances came against Chris Flexen this year. He would have outrageous numbers. He's a very good young left-handed second baseman, particularly if he's hitting cleanup, third, fifth, somewhere up there. Totally, totally happy with the option, and I don't know, might get myself invested in some Tigers because there's some bats to pay up for, there's some pitchers to pay up for. It's probably a good path to Chris Sale. Spencer Torkelson, 4,000, 2,800, the first righty in this projected version of the lineup. He's been terrible this season, but he was doing well in AAA. He was very good in the show last year as far as a right-handed power bat that was establishing a firm footing as a major league hitter. Slipped a lot this season, but does still have a lot of raw ability. 4,000, 2,800 across sites. Against Chris Flexen, definitely not off the board. Jace Young, 2,400, 2,300, top prospect for this team. 23 mediocre plate appearances so far, but a lot of ability for just 23 at second base on FanDuel. 24 at third base. They did us a favor with that positioning. Third base there, second base there, so no conflict. Here you got to go second base util, which isn't necessarily ideal if you're stacking this team. It's probably one or the other between him and Keith when I would like to have them both. But that said, with the shorter four-man stack on FanDuel, it's also less of an issue. Zach McKinstry has been here for 251 plate appearances this year, and he's not all that good. The guy I'm more interested in further down the lineup is Trey Sweeney for just 22-23. Shortstop, maybe not the best way to fill it with a kid who just came up, but he's a relatively highly regarded prospect. Has a home run already on the board in his 11 plate appearances. You could probably do worse than a very, very cheap Trey Sweeney getting an opportunity against Chris Flexen if he's in the lineup. Jake Rogers, mix and match catcher with some power upside, 9 home runs on the year. Another player that just benefits from facing Chris Flexen. If you're going to the White Sox, you do have some power showing today. 15.3 for Lubob. Even Benintendi checking in at 9.58 in the home run model. 9.88 for Andrew Vaughn going against Montero, and his track record for allowing a little bit of power. That said, those guys have 14, 13, and 14 home runs apiece over 297, 399, and 485 plate appearances. So that total is 41 in 1,181 plate appearances. And Aaron Judge has, 48, I want to say, in 500 and change plate appearances? So those 3 hitters in 3 times as many plate appearances combined to hit 7 fewer home runs than Aaron Judge has. Just by way of handy comparison. That's a top priority bat in this lineup. That's your second priority. And then I continue to prefer Gavin Sheets, maybe some cheap Corey Lee if you're stacking them on DraftKings and you just want to grab a catcher here. I prefer those bats to Andrew Benintendi, but Benny's pulled his season together a little bit, at least in terms of hitting for power, oddly now. 399 plate appearances, 13 homers, a 146 ISO. He's still bad. Everybody in this lineup is a substandard run creator. That is an average 74 WRC plus on the average for the 9-man lineup. It's pathetic. Sheets has 8 home runs. Mix and match caliber at best, 137 ISO and 94 WRC plus. Corey Lee is giving you 10 homers and 5 steals, but doesn't do anything with any kind of consistency. Dom Fletcher, not good at all. 56 WRC plus, no home runs, no steals in 132 chances. Leonard Sosa has 4 homers and 3 steals in 248 opportunities, but a terrible slash line of 51 WRC plus. Brooks Baldwin hasn't given you anything over his 102 chances. It favors Montero, but it's probably more of a day where it's like, all right, the White Sox, Lubob homered. They scored 4 runs, 5 runs. Ruin the Montero play, but weren't a good stack. Greatly prefer Tigers bats. I'm going to put them on top. Tigers bats on top. Cater Montero. If you're absolutely crazy desperate, maybe the White Sox get there, but even Vegas doesn't like them above 4 runs, so that's pretty telling. JP Sears on a pretty good run of starts. I mentioned it at the beginning of the show. We are working on 4 straight starts of at least 7 innings. Went 7 2/3 in his most recent outing against the Giants. 1 run allowed on 7 hits, struck out 9. Also had a 9 strikeout performance against the same Giants team in San Francisco. 4 starts back on the 30th. No runs allowed in that game. Gave up just 1 to Chicago, to the White Sox. Struck out 5, walked 1. And gave up 3 earned runs on 3 hits over 7 to Toronto at Toronto. 4 strikeouts, 3 walks in what was his worst start in that recent stretch. That does come on the back of a 7 earned run start to Houston over 6 innings prior to that on July 24th. Very much an up and down pitcher. Very much a 18.8% strikeout rate. Realistically, maxes out at like a 1 in 5 in terms of the ongoing, but can hit higher peaks than that, as evidenced by those 2 9 strikeout games. 4.15 ERA, but a 4.69 xFIP is a little bit revealing about the quality. 10.4% swinging is okay, 26.6% is not, but only 6.3% walks is just fine. 9.2% barrels is a little high, but these are okay, and so is that. So he's very much a mixed bag of quality. I do not like the 92 on FanDuel, 83 on DraftKings, a lot more reasonable. The Brewers are good run creators overall. They're good at getting on base. There are some strikeouts in that lineup, 22.6% for this projected version. I think Sears is playable, mostly here. Not a priority, though. Savali, on the other hand, 72-77. Kind of, I don't know, looks pretty good. 21.7% strikeout rate over 124 and a third, 4.78 ERA, but a 4.28 xFIP. Given the way that Savali started this season, the idea that he's even this low in terms of the actual run allowed number and then what the xFIP looks like most particularly, it's not completely terrible. The home runs obviously is problematic, but it comes on not a bad barrel rate, not a bad hard hit rate, not a bad exit velo mark. So just a little bit of lost opportunities, lost some happenstance in there. He's mostly been better since joining the Brewers. Gave up 4 to the Dodgers over 5 innings, gave up 5 to the Nationals over 4 innings. Those were 2 bad starts. But a 3-run start, a 1-run start, 2 runs, a shutout. Last time out, he shut out the Guardians over 6 innings, struck out just 4, but it's the Guardians. 4 hits allowed. 6 1/3 against the Reds, struck out 5, 2 walks, a homer, but only 2 runs on 5 hits. For the money, I think you could take your shots with Savali against this A's team. I really do, and I think he's a good alternative from your Mackenzie Gore, whether you want that or not, and then definitely from your Hayden Birdsong against the Mariners that we'll talk about in a minute. A's are very gettable. 24.8% strikeout rate for this projected version of the lineup. That said, if the power issues crop up for Savali, could be a bad day pretty quickly because the A's do have power bats in that lineup. Starting on the Brewers side for the bats, Jackson Chourio off the top. 4,200 is too cheap for him on DraftKings. 3,300 is more correct on FanDuel, but still feels kind of light. He's up to a 110 WRC plus, 15 homers, 18 steals, and tons of ability for the outfielder. He is just too cheap on DraftKings. I know he's a rookie. I know he had a bad start or a slow start, but we got to catch up at this point. He is better than these prices. Rhys Hoskins, 38-29, 20 home runs, 202 ISO, 100 on the nose for WRC+. Still a good power bat from the right side of the plate. 38-29 is not a bad price to find Rhys Hoskins against JP Sears. William Contreras, 53-36, has 17 home runs, a 183 ISO. You get a 196 ISO out of Willie Adames in the next spot. He's hit 22 home runs and stolen 13 bases, 116 WRC plus for him, 131 WRC plus for Contreras to lead the team. Those are your 2 top priority bats in this lineup, but Chourio's right there with those guys. So it's really, 1, 2, 3, and then you get a pretty good 4 there for Hoskins, even if he's hitting further down the lineup. If Gary Sanchez is in the lineup, you can pick him off for a lot of catcher power upside. He's only hit 8 home runs, but it's only in 208 plate appearances. 169 ISO, still makes elite level contact when he connects. Gary's always just been high strikeout, but the contact has never gone away. His ability to hit home runs has never gone away. So if he's in the lineup, you can absolutely include him. Blake Perkins at 22-27, mix and match caliber, 6 home runs, 17 steals, a 97 WRC plus, not tremendously far off the mark, but substandard. Joey Ortiz, 35-27, 8 home runs, 7 steals, a solid 110 WRC plus, a very good 345 on base. Everybody on this team gets on at least an okay clip. So that's what I mean when I say that Sears is a little bit dangerous as far as the sequencing, the run creation with this team goes. Sal Frelick, mix and match option, 16 steals, a 333 on base. Not a terrible way to wrap around back to the top of the lineup, but kind of a light, put the ball in play kind of a hitter and correlated scoring. Andrew Monasterio, not all that good at the bottom of the lineup. 79 WRC plus. If he's in there, he's entirely skippable. I do think you can stack some A's against Savali, as much as he maybe has improved a little bit recently. Still also has a little bit of gettability in that track record, and the season overall has not been good. It's been targetable for power against, been targetable for run creation. So at least as a hedge, if you take a big Savali position, definitely hedge with some A's. If you don't take a Savali position, you just want a low-owned, cheap contrarian kind of a team, the A's are not terrible for that. You get a very good Brent Rooker in the middle of, in the 2 spot at 14.87. Then you get a 10.78 from Shea Langoliers in the home run model a few spots later in the middle of the lineup. And some reasonably okay players in between for cheap prices. Lawrence Butler from the top of the lineup. We all saw that ridiculous tear that he went on earlier in the month. He's cooled off dramatically since then, but he still does have that raw ability, and he's very cheap in the outfield. Lefty bat to start off against Savali. J.J. Bleday hitting on the other side of Rooker at 39-29. He's hit 17 home runs this year. He's got a 200-plus ISO. He's created runs 21% better than average on a bad ball club. 18.3% strikeouts and 10.5% walks. I don't exactly know what's wrong with J.J. Bleday's season that would have him quite so cheap. Miguel Andujar hitting for a little bit of average, creating runs 3% better than average, but not really doing all that much on the field. For DFS purposes, he's more skippable than some of the guys around him, but he's also playable. Langoliers, $4,600 at catcher, 13.9% barrels and 43.4% hard hits. Again, 10 plus in the home run model, 2,900 on FanDuel, 22 homers on the year, 227 ISO. He's been a very good bat for them. Just doesn't give you a lot of games of other stuff. A lot of home run or bust type days with Langoliers, but worth going to for that. Seth Brown, very cheap for his ability. 10 home runs and 285 plate appearances. Just a 148 ISO. Not making great contact, but we're moving up in the world. 9% barrels, 37.6% hard hits isn't terrible, and he's been way better than that in years past. So a lot of ability from Seth Brown. I wouldn't necessarily sleep on it. Zach Geloff having a good year for power and counting stats. 15 homers and 16 steals. 164 ISO is just okay. 80 WRC plus is obviously disappointing. And 198, 267, 362. It gets worse as you continue talking about it. But for the cheap pricing, the ability to hit a ball over the wall, or if you happen to get on, steal a base, correlate, score some runs, not bad prices at second base if you're going to this team for value anyway. You could do worse than putting Zach Geloff in a lineup. Daryl Ernaiz, another name I have difficulty saying. I think it's those L's aligning with that silent H. Or maybe it's not silent. I don't know how he says it. Daryl Ernaiz at the $2,000 dead min third base shortstop on DraftKings, 2,200 on FanDuel. I don't know. Is he even mix and match caliber? 117 pretty bad plate appearances out of Ernaiz so far. Max Schumann, 24-26, kind of similar. 6 home runs, 11 steals. A little bit more playable and is getting on base at an interesting 330 clip. If you're looking for a cheap wraparound, not ideal to have him at shortstop over here, and I prefer Geloff at second base there. But he's in the lineup and he does get on base fairly consistently to put ahead of Butler and Rooker 3 times through the lineup. So, not terrible. Aaron Savali, JP Sears, Brewers bats, A's bats. 4 corners game, but it's another one where the pitching probably outweighs the hitting a little bit, given the sub-4 totals in Vegas. Kind of aligns with like that game. But it is a spot. It is 4 cornersy in that I can easily see the Brewers getting to JP Sears, and I can definitely see the A's getting to Aaron Savali. So maybe a little light in Vegas. What happens if we call it an 8? 419 and 389. It seems a little bit more reasonable. Anyway, need to keep on moving. It looks like the last game, but it's not. There's 2 more after this one. Coming up on 5:48. We're making okay time. Not terrible. He's targeting a 6:15 punch out. We're doing all right. Paul Blackburn on the hill for the Metsies. 8,400, 8,300. Decent projection. Okay pitcher. 4.19 ERA, a 4.12 xFIP, 10.2% swinging, but only a 24.7% CSW. That does not align well with that swinging strike rate. He should be a better strike thrower than that. Only walks 7%, so it's not really a problem, but could spike to a better strikeout rate overall if he manages to find some additional called strikes. 3.33% home runs, but it comes on 34.9% hard hits, 87.3 miles an hour of exit velo. So it's another pitcher where it really just seems like some mistakes have gone against him, bad luck on a few mistakes. This is a very good hard hit rate, good exit velo. He's pretty good at inducing weak and medium contact this year. Keeps it on a respectable 11.2% barrel average launch angle. Not bad numbers across the board for Blackburn if you're just like looking for support for why could I play Paul Blackburn at 84, 83 against the Padres. But it's a terrible matchup, bad for strikeouts, bad for just general offensive downside. I don't really see it at these prices. If they had done us a favor and landed him in the 7s on either site, I would be a lot more inclined to be talking enthusiastically about Blackburn. 4 strikeouts against Miami in his last game, just 1 earned run on 4 hits over 6 innings. Capable of giving you that start today, but 8,400, I don't know that buys you any kind of upside to the win. Same at 83 on FanDuel. Joe Musgrove making his 3rd start back. 4 1/3 in both of his first 2 starts. Faced 17 hitters in each game. 1 earned run against Colorado at Coors Field in the last one. Struck out 6. Was actually pretty effective over 4 1/3, but short outing. Against the Pirates, 4 1/3. No earned runs on 2 hits. 1 strikeout, 1 walk in that one. Again, effective, but not really for DFS. 82-77 with the idea that we're probably just getting 5 innings here against a pretty good Mets lineup. I question where Vegas has the Mets. 3-5-3 against a half of Joe Musgrove, and then the bullpen. This Mets team is better than that, so not really sure on that one. I don't love the Musgrove play for the money, 82-77. At best, maybe some light shares toward the back of like 150. Musgrove is a good pitcher overall, but this year was kind of diminished earlier in the year, and then just was absent for most of the season. 4.97 ERA, 4.34 xFIP. That again, I'll remind you, have been improved over those last two outings. Just 20.6% strikeouts on the year, 12.8% swinging, 29% CSW. Still a good strike thrower. Stuff Plus still likes the arsenal, but he's been giving up some premium contact, some power earlier in the year. So it's been a little bit of problematic outings, and again, just not able to snap into consistency because he missed so much time. I would take the Mets side of that. Frankie Lindor off the top, probably going to be low owned given that low total. 5,800, 3,900, 25 homers, 25 steals, 341 on base, 133 WRC plus. Tremendous shortstop option for slightly less money than your other star caliber shortstops, and he aligns perfectly well with all those guys. Hey, look at that. Mark Vientos up to 49. Can we crack 5,000? I feel like they put it at 49 just to mess with us. They know that he's a $5,000 player. 20 home runs, 275 ISO, 150 WRC plus, but that price is going up. Good job, DraftKings. 32 on FanDuel, still very cheap across both sites for the ability and for the numbers that he's providing this year. It's not just a player that I'm saying, hey, he's a young guy. There's a lot of ability there, I promise, even though the stats aren't good. Stats are good. He's just too cheap. Nimmo, 4,800, 3,300. You could say similar about Nimmo. That's pretty cheap for Brandon Nimmo. 227, 344, 10. Gets on base at a very strong clip. Steals the occasional base. Hits the occasional home run. Solid 183 ISO, 117 WRC plus. And making very good contact from the left side. Definitely an interesting bat against Joe Musgrove. JD Martinez and Pete Alonso, two premium right-handed power bats with tons and tons of contact upside. Martinez striking out at a 27.8% clip. They're both walking 10.3% of the time. Alonso much better at 22.8% strikeouts. They're both a little gettable for Ks, but obviously, again, Alonso managing it better. Similar in terms of the average, the on base, even the WRC plus, but Alonso's got a better ISO at 224. He's found more success for home runs, 27 home runs in his 553 chances, to Martinez's 14 in 400 plate appearances. Alonso's also finding more extra base hits along the way, but two reasonably good options, 4,600, 5,200. They're offset by more price on DraftKings than they are by just $100 on FanDuel. Jesse Winker at 3,600, 2,900 is very cheap in the outfield for a guy having a pretty good year. 12 homers, 14 steals, 153 ISO, 124 WRC plus. Not a bad left-handed option if you're going to Mets stacks. Honestly, to me, that's kind of a compelling reason to consider some Mets, is that I can get him so cheap in combination with these other hitters that I consider at a discount. That's just making it even more extreme. Francisco Alvarez, 31-26. Where you have to play catchers, that is still, I promise you, a bargain for that hitter's talent. 6 home runs on the year, 243, 309, 394. We saw a lot more home run power from him last year. There's significant any given slate upside there at that price. Jeff McNeil, 33-27, mix and match quality player at best. Harrison Bader, 32-28, gives you a little bit of sneaky counting stat upside from time to time, but just a 94 WRC plus is pretty accurate for when you try and measure its consistency. 8 home runs, 15 stolen bases, just a 302 on base. Neither guy at the bottom is overly appealing. Both are somewhat playable. Padres bats going to be pretty playable against Paul Blackburn. You take the good with the bad with the Pods. They don't have a ton of power, but they've got some decent medium-type power bats. Everybody in the lineup basically is low strikeout. They have a lot of guys who are able to steal a base, create a run, get on base. So they do interesting enough things, but they're not like the elite-level DFS teams in a lot of ways. So it definitely dings them a little bit. And then again, Blackburn has been good at limiting premium contact. Has been pretty decent this season. So not the most appealing spot to find the Padres. 3,900, 2,800 for Arraez. Not ideal at first base. Second base is where you'd want him on the FanDuel slate. 303, 336, 374. Really just a correlated scoring option, but he's very good at doing that. Jurickson Profar, 49. I say very good. He's only got a 102 WRC plus this season. Part of that was with the Marlins. He really scuffled his way through the beginning part of the season. He's not been as good as he's been in years past. We saw him, chase 400 for a large part of last season. Monster on base percentage. He still does have that raw skill set, that back control ability, the low strikeout, low walk, put the ball in play kind of approach. Just some of the results have been a little bit off the mark this year. Profar at 49, 30, 34, obviously still having a tremendous year. 20 home runs, 7 steals, 388 on base, creating runs 46% better than average. 4,900 for him too. He can go in the bucket with Vientos for being too cheap. 34 on FanDuel is more correct. Definitely a playable part if you're going to the Padres. Cronenworth at 45, 3,000, not unreasonable for his talent. 108 WRC plus, 15 homers. He's just okay, but at those prices, he's fine. Manny Machado at 51, 32. Fills third base effectively, 20 home runs for Manny, a 180 ISO. We're diminished in terms of the output, but the contact is not bad. 10.1% barrels, 48% hard hits. Both those numbers floating right around what he's done over the last couple of years. So I'm still, even with the, as we creep towards September, I'm not like concerned with the output from Manny. I think it's just going to be a somewhat diminished into his 30s kind of a season. Wouldn't rule out a major bounce back from this hitter next year, or even a very strong 6 weeks to close out the season. Xander Bogaerts, 270, 316, 373. The quality really tends to come and go with Bogey, but he's not expensive. 4,300 at second base, 2,900 shortstop at second base on FanDuel. He's still a highly playable option. He's just kind of in the middle of the board. Doesn't do a lot of exceptional things right now. Merrill, 46, 34, 18 homers, 13 steals. Chasing that rookie of the year in the NL like we talked about yesterday. 470 very good plate appearances this year, creating runs 25% better than average. David Peralta, not as good as the rookie, but still effective. 118 WRC plus and 189 chances. 6 home runs on the board, a decent slash line. Peralta's still playable. He's very cheap at 35.27. Kyle Higashioka, if he's in the lineup, 36-29, 14 home runs on the season, 275 ISO. Monster power bat that remains very cheap at the bottom of the lineup, and then the other way, just cheap. Some challenging spots to rank today. They really are. I don't want to put the Padres over the Mets. I don't believe. Mets bats, Padres bats, despite what Vegas is telling you. Blackburn over Musgrove for DFS, but really it's neither of these guys. I don't think there's enough strikeout upside for Blackburn to support the pricing. I don't think Musgrove's going to give you innings against a pretty good Mets team to support the pricing. Jordan Alvarez scratched too. Jeez. Oh, shit. Jake, is that true? I mean, I assume you wouldn't say it if it wasn't true. That's messed up. Yeah, as Jake mentions in the chat, let's get some prayers up for Sean V. Prayers, good feelings, good thinking, best wishes, whatever you can manage, whatever your personal belief system is. Sean V, a longtime member of the Awesemo and general DFS community. As Jake says, whether you like him or hate him, definitely an invested member of the DFS community. Doesn't really hang out over here, but I'm sure most of you guys remember him from the Awesemo days. So, that's obviously really bad news to hear, and let's hope for the best. That's awful. Appreciate you letting me know, Jake, and letting all of us know. It's definitely, you don't want to hear those things ever, but when they do happen, you want to know about them. Luis Castillo, Hayden Birdsong. That felt like a Castellanos. And there's a long drive to right. But Sean V would want us to continue, I think. Oh, jeez. That's awful, Trey. Best wishes to your friend as well, buddy. Let's pivot, though. Let's get back to baseball. Let's not make this the sad feelings the sad feelings show. That's awful news. Hopefully your friend gets better. Hopefully Sean gets better. So Luis Castillo, good opportunity against the Giants. 26.5% strikeout rate for this projected version of the Giants lineup. They are definitely targetable. That said, that does come with a uptick from Grant McCray, over 26 plate appearances at the bottom, but that's also additionally offset a little bit by Kurt Casale's low rate. If you're taking just the top group of hitters there, it's 24.7. Still targetable for Castillo, who checks in at 24.4 on his own, 3.51 ERA with a 3.76 xFIP. Very solid 11.3% swinging strike rate. The numbers overall down a little bit from previous seasons. He was 27% strikeouts in the last 2 years, but the ERA, the xFIP, not off the mark. The swinging strikes are down a little bit, so it's a little bit of a dip in strike throwing overall. But it hasn't really impacted the general quality that Luis Castillo brings most nights, and against a targetable team like the Giants. For 10-2, it's perfectly fine on FanDuel. For 9,800, it's appealing on DraftKings. A lot of upside for Castillo today. The guy that I think everybody wants to talk about is a very cheap Hayden Birdsong going against this Mariners team that we've absolutely targeted all season long. 27.5% strikeouts for Birdie so far. 5.01 ERA and a 4.15 xFIP. That's a lot better looking than that ERA. He's had some issues with the long ball. 10.5% barrels, 45.7% hard hits, 90.8 miles an hour of exit velo, amounting to a 4.49% home run in the 9 starts, the short sample, the 41 and a third innings. That said, there have been some really good high points in there. Most notably, a 12 strikeout performance against Colorado at Coors Field. Gave up just 2 earned runs on 2 hits over 6 innings. Monster game there. An 8 strikeout game against that same Rockies lineup in the next one in a home start. 5 innings, no runs on 3 hits. Handful of 5 strikeout games. Again, he struck out 5 different times in his 9 starts. The depth is the concern. 4 2/3 in his most recent outing, despite pitching pretty well. 5 strikeouts, 3 walks, 3 hits allowed, 1 run. Over just 4 2/3 against Oakland, 4 1/3 against Detroit, 5 earned runs. You can see why he probably came out of that one. 5 strikeouts though, 2 home runs allowed. The bumpiest spot came actually in an outing against the Nationals. 3 starts back. It was the day I traded him. 7 earned runs. That's why. Obviously, he knew that I traded him. So obviously brokenhearted and couldn't manage to pitch a good game. But only lasted 2 innings against the Nats. Gave up 7 earned runs on 5 hits, 2 home runs, 1 strikeout, 3 walks. That was a meltdown. The other starts around it, though, I mean, he has really not been bad. So against a very gettable Mariners team with a 25.3% strikeout rate for the projected version of the lineup, I think there's some decent upside. If that changeup is working, somebody mentioned his off-speed pitches earlier in the chat, and that his spike change is what he calls it. It's a unique kind of a grip on his changeup, and it's been super effective. Why can't I get that to go away? All right, there we go. So it's a super effective pitch. That's working for him against this free-swinging Mariners squad. There is a very high ceiling. Has to manage walks, obviously. Has to limit power, and there are some decent power bats here. You can see 2 guys in the high 9s, 1 guy in the low 9s, and 2 guys over the magic number. The Mariners are probably on the board a little bit as a contrarian hedge position against Birdsong shares. You can see the top 6 has a 10+ in the home run model on, just for the full group of hitters, and not a bad total despite a 0.74 at the bottom of the lineup for the full lineup. So maybe a little bit more upside than usual for the Mariners as well. But if I had to, I would probably take the Birdsong side, considering how good he is and how many times we've succeeded against this Mariners lineup this year. Giants against Luis Castillo feels like the weaker side of this. It's also definitely the weaker side on the Vegas board at just 3.26 implied runs, 3.82 implied on the other side for the Mariners. A little bit more belief in Vegas, but again, that's probably more reflective of a little bit of this home run downside and the fact that the Mariners are terrible at sequencing, getting on base, and paying off any of that power. So 4-run game against Birdsong on a bad day seems like it's probably more likely than the big blow up, at least as far as Vegas is concerned. If you're going to Giants, Tyler Fitz off the top has been on a roll. 14 homers, 14 steals on the season, a 165 WRC plus, a 287 ISO. Kid's been absolutely tremendous and has good numbers to support it in the minors. Just a tough matchup against Luis Castillo, but a top priority bat in that lineup. That said, do I really want to pay 52 for Tyler Fitz against a really good pitcher at shortstop on DraftKings today? That's getting up there. I know the numbers have been good. I know that he is actually good, but I don't know if that price really compares all that favorably with some of the stars, or if you go down a step, some of the much cheaper Zach Nettos of the world. More likely than not, Tyler Fitzgerald ends up being a comp for Zach Neto than for Bobby Witt. I think that's still fair. At FanDuel, it's a little bit lessened because you can put him at second base. You can get him in the outfield. Lamont Wade, 34.25, continues to be pretty cheap despite a 403 on base, a 128 WRC plus. Hasn't really hit for power this season. He's been a little bit diminished, but he's still making good contact, still extremely high walk, so could exploit some of the downside from Castillo, but Castillo's very good at limiting walks, keeping free passes and guys off base. So questionable spot for Wade, but he's very, very cheap at those prices on both sides. Elliot Ramos, 4,500, 3,000, 18 home runs at 211 ISO, 132 WRC plus. Member of the Mark Vientos All-Stars, being too cheap for a successful season so far, over 385 plate appearances. He should justifiably be 49, 5,000, where Vientos is. 16.1% barrels, 47.6% hard hits on the year. Conforto, 39.28, 13 home runs on the year, 202 ISO, 112 WRC plus. You get a 197 ISO and a 119 WRC plus with 20 homers and 12 steals out of Matt Chapman. 5,000, 3,000 across sites. Not a terrible option. 5.77 in the home run model. Yaz is basically Conforto light for a little bit less, 3,200, 2,600 across sites. 9 home runs out of him, a 178 ISO, 104 WRC plus from the lefty outfielder. Thairo Estrada, mix and match caliber option this year, 217, 249, 349 in a disappointing season. Has more ability than that, but we really haven't seen it this year. Grant McCray, mix and match 25-23 across sites, 1 home run in his 26 opportunities so far. Kurt Casale, 21, 2,000, just a very, very cheap catcher, but not a lot of output from Casale. For the Mariners, Victor Robles, was he out of the lineup yesterday? Oh, we do it. Do we have this? Lebs has either not put it up or I need to reload the page. Let's see. Sounds like Robles isn't playing. Yep, Luke Raley in the leadoff spot. Thought Robles had been out. He's dealing with a hip of some kind, which for a player with his skill set, obviously that's a pretty devastating malady. Even if it's not serious, just when your entire skill set is based on speed, a hip injury or just a hip ouchie is probably not great. Luke Raley, decent option in the leadoff spot, though, 3,700. You can see he jumps up to an 11.12 in that spot in the lineup as far as the home run model goes. 15 long balls on the season and 353 chances, a 192 ISO. Decent opportunity for some power. Also, a little bit of speed, 9 stolen bases this year. Last year, he was better, 249, 333, 490, stole 14 bases, hit 19 home runs in 406 chances, a 130 WRC plus, and a killer 241 ISO. There's a lot of ability from Luke Raley for just 3,700, 2,900 outfield and first base on both sides. Definitely a good option. If you're considering Mariners, starting off with Luke Raley makes a lot of sense to me. You also get Julio, you get Randy Arozarena in the outfield in the 2 and the 4 spots in this lineup for very fair prices. 3,000 apiece on FanDuel, 47 and 44 respectively on DraftKings. They bookend Cal Raleigh, the team's best power bat this year. 27 home runs this year for Raleigh, a 224 ISO, a 111 WRC plus. In a down season, Julio's giving you 11 and 18 in terms of home runs and stolen bases. Pretty weak on base percentage, 2 points below average for run creation, but there's still a lot of skill there. Still 9.4% barrels and 47% hard hits if you need something to go hang your hat on. Randy Arozarena, 43.5% hard hits, 8.3% barrels. 25.3% strikeouts, but offsets that with 12.1% walks. Creating runs 11% better than average. That's the same WRC plus that Cal Raleigh's put up. Arozarena just lost a little bit of the power in the counting stat output, 16 home runs, 18 steals, but he is getting on at a 331 clip, which is a big uptick for this team. That immediately drove up the ability to create runs when he joined this squad, so that's probably one of the reasons they went and got him. 4,400, 3,000 for a player with that skill set, getting on base that frequently and still creating runs even in what is a down season. It's not bad. 10.07 in the home run model. Jorge Polanco having a terrible year. 9.51 in the home run model is somewhat believable, though, from a guy who's hit a lot of home runs in his career. 9.9% barrels is diminished from the last 2 years, but in a vacuum, it's not bad. 38.1% hard hits is roughly average. 12 home runs in 350 plate appearances, just a 145 ISO. Wasn't good last year and was largely injured for most of last year. Hit the same 14 home runs in 343 chances. 2 years ago, just 16. But going back in time, now I gotta look. I know it's true. I'm not looking because I doubt the truth of it. I'm looking because I want the numbers. 2021, 33 home runs in 644 chances, 22 home runs in 704 chances in 2019, and then obviously was way later like the rest of us were in 2020. So he's got power, he's got ability, he's been a better player in years past. He's still just 31 and only just turned 31. So for those of you who are under 31, I know that sounds ancient, but I promise it's not. For those of you who are well over 31, like some of us, you remember how young you felt when you were 31. I honestly feel exactly the same. Hopefully you guys do too. But anyway, I don't think Jorge Polanco's completely dead, but he's diminished. He's not been good at all this year, but you can take shots with a 9.51 in the home run model. Mitch Haniger, not a good season, 26 across sites, 12 home runs on the year. The memory of being a good power hitter. I think less of this opportunity for Mitch, and he's more just another outfielder than I think of the spot for Jorge Polanco at second base. That's a little bit better. I know the numbers look very, very similar. Dominic Canzone hits the ball very hard. 11.3% barrels, 44.3% hard hits this year. Similar numbers last year. Just 201, 273, 390 overall, but he's hit 8 home runs. He has a 189 ISO over 183 chances against a pitcher who, again, has had some issues with barrels, with hard hits, with exit velo, and with home runs. Dominic Canzone's on the board if you need to stretch out a Mariner stack down to the 7th spot. Josh Rojas, Leo Rivas, mix and match caliber players, I'll say, at the absolute best. They're cheap, they're playable, but it's the bottom of the Mariners lineup. Feels like we're getting a little desperate at that point. But from here up is not completely terrible, and there's some power showing. Castillo, Birdsong, Mariners bats, and then and only then Giants bats. I really don't think the Giants are all that much on the board. And we've made it. It's the last game. It's 6-12. We're going to miss the mark, but not too tragically. I think people would have bet on us missing the mark even worse than this. Bobby Miller, 7,800, 6,800 across sites. There's a lot of ability here. I know the numbers don't look great over his 8 starts, his 33 innings this year, but last year they looked a lot better. 124 and a third last year, 22 starts as a rookie, 3.76 ERA, 3.75 xFIP that basically matches it. Very solid swinging strike rate, not a bad CSW, 23.6% strikeouts, 6.3% walks. All of that has been eradicated this year so far. 18.1% strikeouts, 12.3% walks is problematic in his limited number of outings. This is just his second start back. He went 4 2/3 in the return to action. 8 hits, 4 earned runs, struck out just 1, walked 1. So probably a little bit limited here. I think I gave him just 5 innings. I think that's realistic given that he pitched into the 5th inning there. But I feel like we're a little bit limited. Probably don't want to take the shot even at the cheap pricing. Don't think we get the upside to the quality start there. And this is a little high. If those prices were reversed, he'd be playable on DraftKings as an SP2. 78 feels a little bit like a high price. Lands there. Right? That's a lot of options above him for similar or cheaper prices. But there's a ton of talent there, and he's facing a Rays lineup with a 30.3% strikeout rate. Even in 5 innings, he could spike a pretty decent strikeout game if he's on. So I hesitate to completely remove him from the board, but I think the option is a little bit weak. Tyler Alexander, I want no part of on the other side. 5.17 ERA, a 4.42 xFIP, giving up a 4.86% home run rate on a ridiculously bad barrel rate and an extreme fly ball trajectory. Makes me not care that those numbers are not terrible on their own or that he doesn't really walk that many hitters. Not a good strikeout pitcher and absurd home run numbers for the Dodgers. They look like a great option today. 20 plus for Shohei, doubling up the magic number. Mookie was the home run pick of the day right at the magic number, 10.73. You also get Freddie. You also get Teoscar Hernandez. Let's not sleep on Max Muncy down lineup. Will Smith at 9.76. Ridiculous power showing for the elite Dodgers, who are basically back to being the fully formed version of this team. If you're starting with bats on the Rays side, you're starting with the wrong team, but we can go through them real quick if you want. Yandy Diaz, 3,800, 2,900, 10 home runs, 123 ISO is disappointing from a guy who's been a very good hitter over the last 2 seasons. Still gets on base at a decent clip, still creates runs okay, but we're greatly diminished. That said, the price has come down right along with the underperformance. 29 is very cheap for that hitter and who he's been over the last 2 years. 38 pretty cheap on DraftKings as well. 5,000 for Brendan Lau with first and second base eligibility. Not bad. 34, same thing on FanDuel. 16 home runs and just 309 chances. Very solid 245 ISO. Looking a lot like Brendan Lau out there. Everything about this all aligns. High strikeout, medium, decently high walk rate. Very good option at second base for the money. Dylan Carlson, 29-26, 3 home runs, 2 steals on the season in 193 chances. Pretty skippable. Seems like the Rays feel like they know something that we don't or want to take a shot on a kid who was at one point a decently regarded prospect, but really hasn't shown us anything in the show at all. He's cheap. He's in the heart of the lineup if that's where he's hitting, but that's about all he is. Christopher Morel is more appealing. 4,000 at second base on DK, 2,800 third base, second base on FanDuel. He's hit 20 home runs. He's only slashing 194, 296, 355 between here and Chicago. 503 plate appearances. It's a full season. 161 ISO, 86 WRC plus. There's a lot of weaknesses, a lot of inconsistency there, but he definitely can hit home runs, and he could definitely hit a home run against Bobby Miller, who's in his limited sample really had some problems with premium contact and home runs of his own. Josh Lowe at 4,000, 3,000 is playable. 7 home runs, 17 steals in kind of a weak season. Had a great year last year, 292, 335, 500 at 208 ISO, 20 home runs and 32 stolen bases. This year, we haven't been close to those numbers, 231, 293, 393. The 7 home runs and 17 steals, though, only come in 256 plate appearances and a sub 300 on base. So, in a vacuum, the counting stats are actually kind of good. Junior Caminero, top prospect in all of baseball. 35 pretty bad plate appearances so far, but a ton of upside. Getting on base at a 343 clip is good, at least in the debut. He's hit the ball squarely a couple of times, it looks like. Hasn't really struck out. I mean, there's some strikeouts there, don't get me wrong, but that's average-ish, and a good walk rate in the tiny, tiny sample to support the on-base. Stolen 2 bases. There's a lot of ability there for a cheap price. 32.24 is too cheap, even as a rookie who is completely unestablished. Just knowing what his numbers look like in the minors, knowing his prospect pedigree, those prices are too cheap out of the gate. Taylor Walls at 23.25, skippable, mix and match at best. Cameron Misner, same thing at the dead min, 2,100. Alex Jackson gives you a little bit of ability to drive the ball, but only 3 home runs in 144 chances and a 115 WRC, 115 ISO. Not a consistent player at all, but 9.8% barrels. On the Dodgers side, Mr. Ohtani, top of the board again. I almost made him the home run pick of the day, but I didn't want to go to Shohei Ohtani because it's just like using Aaron Judge. I don't like doing that. Doubling up the magic number for home run power, though. 39 long balls, 39 stolen bases. A just ridiculous season in a career of ridiculous seasons for Shohei Ohtani. He's elite. He is definitely a top priority bat in this lineup. If you can't afford him and Mookie, just taking Mookie is not a terrible alternative, especially on FanDuel where he fits in at second base. You knew I was going to say that. Outfield only on DraftKings, 6,100, perfectly fine over there. Shortstop eligible as well as the outfield eligibility on FanDuel just enhances the play even more. 12 homers, 10 steals, a 189 ISO, 152 WRC plus, and a killer slash line. Freddie Freeman, 5,200, 3,500, getting too cheap on DK. 9.6% barrels, 40.9% hard hits, 17 homers, 196 ISO, still slashing 293, 89, 486. I know we're used to seeing Freddie be a 300 hitter, but there's not really that much diminishment, and everything else is still fantastic. Take the discount. 5,000, 3,500 for Teoscar Hernandez, who has 26 home runs this year at 219 ISO. Pretty effective pricing for a guy making this kind of contact with that kind of output. Not a bad option at all. Will Smith, top-end catcher on the entire slate, 4,900, too cheap on DraftKings. 16 home runs, a 187 ISO, and creating runs 11% better than average, and he plays basically every day. He should pretty much never be below 5,000 on DraftKings. That should be his floor for salary. 31 on FanDuel, totally playable in line with Freddie or instead of Freddie. Max Muncy at 4,700, 3,300, also too cheap. 11 home runs, a 289 ISO in his limited 179 plate appearances. Not his fault he's been hurt for most of the season. Max Muncy mashes from the left side, if you like to be alliterative about things. 11.9% barrels this year, 14.6 last year, 13.4 the year before, mid-40s hard hit rates every year, draws a bunch of walks, so he's a good 3 true outcomes guy, gets to first base, pays off a good on-base percentage, good run creator. Too cheap down lineup. Nothing wrong with the saying, all right, I got to make a sacrifice here, but I'll pick up some quality there. Same thing on DK. Getting these guys as cheap as they are. And I know those aren't, like, compared to everybody on the slate, cheap necessarily, but for these players, the names that you're getting on those jerseys and the results, and then in combination with those guys, those are definitely aggressively cheap prices. Chris Taylor at 28-22, not having a good year, over 189 plate appearances. If he's in the lineup, he's both skippable and playable, considering how cheap he is, what his career track record looks like, and the multi-position of it. But he has not provided desirable output so far this year. Miguel Rojas has been a lot better, 247 pretty decent plate appearances, limited for counting stats, limited for DFS output, more of a correlated scoring play in a bad spot in the lineup. But he's cheap. If you're going down that spot of the lineup, you can do worse. Tommy Edman, 35-24, multi-position on both sites. A good player who's only made 11 plate appearances this year. Stole a base since joining this team. Last year, 13 homers, 27 steals, just a 92 WRC plus. Year before, 13 and 32 with a 108 WRC plus. He's always been good for like mid-range power, some stolen bases, some decent output. So I don't dislike Tommy Edman. Switch hitter at the bottom of the lineup. Makes a lot of things work at cheap pricing. Solid little wraparound play back up to the top. Dodgers bats. And that's it. Yeah, really no argument for rostering Tyler Alexander. Rays bats are probably actually on the board. So Dodgers bats, then Rays bats. Miller, again, I don't think he's inappropriately priced on FanDuel, but I don't think you're getting your quality start bonus. You're probably looking at 5 innings. DK, I don't think he's cheap enough for the 5-inning start. And that's it, gang. We did it. It's 6:21. We missed by 6 minutes with still the wrap-up to go, but not bad. For a 14-gamer, not bad. Chris Sale, top of your board, 11-5, 11-1. Super expensive, but we've got some angles to pay for him. I kind of like that Detroit angle as far as getting cheap with some bats. Pair them with, Yankees, Red Sox, Dodgers, high-end team like that. Get to Chris Sale if you can on either site with those. I think you're doing yourself some favors there. Carlos Rodon, not a bad alternative at 9,700. Very fairly priced for a matchup against the Rockies for a talented pitcher with good strikeout stuff. Just, a little bit threatened by his mixed results, his allowing some power this year, and of course the ballpark. Luis Castillo, tremendous option at 10-2-98. A lot of strikeouts upside in that against that Giants team. Mackenzie Gore is our big question mark of the day. If I don't find a way to pay up to that, that's probably where I'm going to go, and I'm just going to try and win it with bats. Again, it's a low faith option. He has not been good in this second half of the season, but he's got ability. There are a lot of strikeouts in that Braves lineup, and they've been greatly diminished lately. I'm kind of buying in. Bassett against LA, believable. 8,500, 8,800, not incorrectly priced for the upside. Does have 7-8 inning appeal on the right day. Evaldi just diminished a little bit by the matchup against Cleveland. It's kind of the same thing for Bybee going the other way. I'd take the upside for strikeouts that Bybee might give you against the Rangers rather than go to Evaldi, even though it's a little bit higher price. But both guys similarly playable, similarly skippable. So is Hunter Brown against the Orioles at the highest price among the three. 9,400 on both sites. Kid's very good. He's been pitching very well, but matchup against the Orioles is definitely not ideal. You can see how he compares to the rest of the board, though. Outside of everything other than price, he looks better. So, there is upside there. It wouldn't shock me if Hunter Brown had a successful day against the Orioles. Winning the slate might be a stretch, but being able to put you in position to compete for the slate win is not out of the question. Birdsong looking really good. 78-66 against Seattle. A lot of upside there. Needs to manage the walks, needs to manage the power, but a talented kid with some good stuff against a highly gettable team we've been targeting all year. That said, on FanDuel, Aaron Savali's $100 cheaper against a similarly targetable Oakland team. He hasn't been as high-end. Well, we've got a much longer track record with Savali. It's not really fair to say he hasn't been as high-end. He's hit similar peaks to Hayden Birdsong's peaks in his short sample, but Savali's had some more significant downside this year. Great matchup. The price difference of $600 more for Savali is a different story on the DraftKings slate, but he is still effectively cheap and a good SP2 option over there. Keener Montero, don't have a ton of faith in the pitcher's overall talent level, but for just 64 against the White Sox, very much in play for an SP2 dart on DraftKings. And with the low total and the terrible opponent, 8,000 is not an awful investment. It's similar-ish to Chris Bassett for 85 against Los Angeles. It's not that far off. So I think he's playable on both sides, definitely more so over on DK. Blackburn, don't like the matchup at all for the money against the Padres. Probably should be cheaper if you could do that in this spot. Sears has definitely given you a good stretch of starts. It's believable that he could succeed on against the Brewers, but they're pretty good. One of the better teams he's faced recently. 83 would play on DK. 92 would not play on FanDuel. Max Meyer, pretty hard no for me against Chicago. They're showing a ton of power. Joe Musgrove, don't think we're getting the innings to really support it on either site, and I think he's the Mets are under projected in Vegas for that run total, which would push things in different directions if we corrected it. Andre Palante just needs to keep the ball down, which he does effectively. Could limit the Twins' power, but I think it's more of a spot where he limits the Twins more than he succeeds for DFS against them. That said, 72-73 is an okay enough price. We really haven't succeeded, I think, maybe once this year on a decent strikeout day. Fairly low-end option, but the price is right. Bobby Miller, don't know that you're getting the innings, but there's a ton of opportunity for Ks, even in a 5-inning start against that Rays squad. And if he's finding success, maybe we squeak out the 6th, but it's a little dicey. 78 on DraftKings. It's a little higher price. I wish those two prices were switched. We'd be really excited about that opportunity at 68 on DraftKings. Waka against Philly, just a why would you spot at 91.87. Ryan Nelson, I think, is kind of interesting. We talked about the output in a stretch of like 10 starts at this point. He's been very, very good. Just a terrible matchup against the Red Sox and a terrible hitting environment in Fenway Park. Brian Bayo on the other side of that game. Same environment, same caliber matchup, 88.77. Pretty reasonable at limiting runs, limiting home run power against, but feels more why would you at this point of the board going all the way down here for an $8,800 pitcher on FanDuel. 77 on DraftKings plays a little bit better, but not really in comparison to a lot of those options. Festa, 73.71. More in play, I think, than either of these guys. 73 plays fairly well for the strikeout upside on FanDuel, but you're probably limited to 5 innings. 71 on DK with 5 innings in his pocket. I think there's definitely some upside there. Appealing enough price-wise. Flexen, hard no. Hendricks, hard no. Povich, hard no. Alexander, Walker, Kachanowicz, and Freeland, all hard no's. Don't think you go to any of those pitchers. I really don't. Even for the discounts. You know, Kachanowicz, maybe you could get away with at the 5K, oddly. The one guy you probably don't know who he is. We talked about it a little bit, just on the ability to maybe work 7 innings for you, oddly. He gives some decent depth, but really, really thin against the low strikeout Blue Jays squad. Rest of those guys, I just don't want at all. There's tons of options up here. Just go to one of those or multiple of those. Here's your home run board. I'm going to throw it up. You can pause on this because I got to get out of here and get stuff updated. You also do have access to all these numbers, of course, at rotoscouts.com in our projections. But there's your home run board. There are a lot of guys above 10 in the home run model today because it's a light pitching slate in terms of the talent level of the pitchers, and it's also a gigantic 14 gamer. With that in mind, you guys, you absolutely rock. Thank you, Monty Pritchett. I appreciate you. Best of luck to you, too, buddy. Have a great weekend. You have a good weekend, too, Hustle. Thank you, Cooch, Larry, everybody else. You guys absolutely rock. Hit the like button. Hit the subscribe. I'm on back over the weekend. Projections and usual content up on the website. We are crashing rapidly into football season. I'm going to be doing some work on football over the weekend, but definitely we'll take care of baseball projections and all the usual stuff for that. Back on Monday for shows, and we'll keep on rocking through the end of September. Hey, hit the like button one last time. Subscribe. Check out acemind.io. Follow the @rotoscouts Twitter handle. And with that, I actually have to say goodbye. Good luck out there tonight, guys. Somebody go win something. We'll see you on Monday.